Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Nika Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What if Deku had Stasis Paralysis Quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Stop it, Kacchan. You're hurting him, a young 4-year-old boy with green hair and eyes named Midoriya shouted, tears in his eyes as he began to lift his fists up, his body shaking like hell. The blonde before him, a bully named Katsuki Bakugu with red eyes, looked confused for a moment, before smirking and punching his hands together, creating an explosion that made the greenette wince. Don't tell me you're gonna play hero. You don't stand a chance without a quirk, Deku. The two other boys beside him also grinned cruelly as they began to activate their own quirks, and Midoriya looked back for a moment, knowing he couldn't run while the kid was still there. So he stood his ground, as his body filled with fear and phantom pains already. It was clear he was in no way a fighter, and so he knew he was only going to be beaten to a pulp. He closed his eyes and waited. His beating never came, however, as suddenly a pink blur appeared in front of him, causing all the boys' eyes to widen in confusion as a little girl with curly hair and bubblegum-colored skin glared at the bully. Hey, why don't you JRKS just leave them alone? Ha, you really need some stupid girl to defend you, Deku? One of the cronies leered, before suddenly another girl's voice spoke up. Defend him? More like put a bunch of wannabe villains in their place. A girl with a fire in her brown eyes, brunette hair and pink pads on her fingers said as she glared at the bullies. Stopping the only decent person of you from getting hurt is just a bonus. Okay, so two girls. The other crony said, as he looked around, seeming to get slightly nervous. Dang it, you too. Yet another girl, this once much lankier than the others with raven hair and onyx eyes, said as she hopped over the fence, followed by 3 more girls. Well, presumably the invisible one was a girl, judging by her blue sundress. There was also a girl with hair a darker shade of green than Midoriya's own that reached down quite far, who had equally darker eyes and a wide mouth, and beside her was the last girl. Make that 6. Said the last girl with a frown, who had bored-looking black eyes, and vibrant but short purple hair. Her earlobes continued much longer than a normal human's, turning into wires similar to headphones, with the kind of jacks one would expect to find on such devices. Who the F dash? Kacchan pondered, growling, which was only met with an equal growl from the pink-skinned girl, who threw her hand out and a glob of liquid flew out, hitting the ground and starting to melt it in part. The two cronies' eyes widened massively. Leave him alone, she said simply, and the two boys at the back seemed to have decided they suddenly didn't want any part in this if they could be hit with that, turning and bolting, leaving the blonde who didn't know how to give up to fend for himself. This was the first time Midoriya ever met his best friends, and with how sudden and surprising their arrival was, with their desire to protect him. One could hardly blame him for thinking they were angels coming to his aid. Bakugu hadn't backed down. He growled and rushed for the pink-skinned girl, or rather, he tried to completely bypass her. Deku. What the F is this dash? He was suddenly smacked out the air by an incredibly long tongue, and so it begun. The first time Tsuyu, Kyoka, Achiko, Momo, Toru and Mina had saved him. Mina Ashido had always been something of a social butterfly, always flitting from one person to the next, happily including whoever she could and talking to them all. Still, just because she was friends with a lot of people, even briefly, didn't mean she really connected with every single one. There were always those select few people she just gelled with in a way that left her scrambling to do everything she could to stay in touch. Not easy for a 4-year-old, but she tried nevertheless. Unfortunately for the girl, it rarely worked out that she'd ever connect with people who she was in constant contact with, so it could be easy to lose these special people. Fortunately for her though, there was 5 girls who she managed to stay in contact with fairly often, partially in thanks to one of them, a girl by the name of Momo Yairuzu, being much more well-off than the rest of them. Her best friends. She'd met the rich girl along with another of her friends, Azui, at around the same time. The pink-skinned girl had always been something of an explorer and tended to get herself into silly misadventures, usually involving her getting caked in mud. After the 3rd time she'd nearly drowned herself in a lake, her parents had driven down to the local swimming center and signed the girl up for their swimming classes they held for children. She'd been super excited when she'd went down that day, bouncing in the car the whole time as she pretended to swim through her blanket that her mother always threw over her to accommodate for the lack of heating. When they'd finally gotten in, they'd met their strict but kind swimming instructor who had eventually instructed them to form groups of 3 each. They'd all complied as the pink-skinned girl tugged at her blue and yellow polka-dot swimsuit, hurrying over to the only other 2 girls in the place. They'd quickly shaken hands, introducing each other. Heya. I'm Mina Ashido, it's nice to meet ya. Mina had been a little intimidated but still found it cool how Momo towered over the others even at such a young age, clearly wearing some kind of black swimsuit meant for 7 years old at a guess. "Oh, hello, my name is Momo Yaoyorozu. It's nice to meet you too." The other girl who had introduced herself with a croak had been Tsuyu Azui, wearing some kind of striped sailor-like uniform as she talked to them. She also had an adorable lisp. "My name is Tsuyu Athui. Ribbit. It's nice to meet you both adh well." It had taken the pink girl a moment to translate the lisp mentally, but as soon as she did, she clapped her hands together happily and had been happy to make new friends. She'd been curious as to why they had been in the class even though there weren't many answers one could give, but she still got some surprisingly unique ones. Azui wasn't here so much for learning how to swim as she was learning to swim properly, as her quirk gave her the abilities of a frog. This meant she was already good at swimming, but she had a few bad habits her parents wanted her to break to be better, especially as the little girl expressed a desire for heroics which had quickly captured the other two's attention. As it turned out, all three of them had an interest in heroics, Ashido found out when she interrogated the tallest of the three next. As well as looking unique, it turned out the girl was actually from a super rich and famous family, which Mina thought sounded so cool. Apparently because Momo wanted to try her hands at something more down to earth than running a business though, her parents had decided that she would of course need a lot of training, and they had decided to take her to a few public learning centers so she could get used to interacting with more normal people. It had been a small connection, but they had found themselves quickly conversing over it until they had been called on by their new instructor. Later, they had all had to leave, but the next time they had come here, they had gone back into the same group and this time even ended up getting Momo's phone number, the only one who had a personal phone. Mina had called her later that day from her house phone, and they had ended up convincing their parents to set up a play date of sorts. Momo had even managed to get a hold of Azui and invite her along as well, which Mina had been more than happy about. She wasn't ever sure how to describe it really, this connection, but as soon as it formed, she just knew it was there. It never let her down, so she always did whatever she could to hold on to it when it showed up, and she was glad she'd managed to find a way to stay in touch with the two girls. Because the connection was there. Mina and Momo walked along the pavement, holding hands so as to not lose each other while they hurried along to the concert. It was rare kids could ever get into a place like this, but Momo's parents had pulled a few strings because of their daughter's love of the band and gotten the girl 2 child's tickets. This meant she'd had to choose between Azui and Ashido. She didn't have many close friends, which had been tearing at her, but ended up being a non-issue when it turned out Azui would be out the country for a week on holiday with her parents. So now the two little girls were right near the back, sitting on top of a support after being lifted up by one Mr. Yaoyorozu to watch as a woman stepped out with long purple hair onto the stage, twirling her elongated earlobe around her finger. It was similar to a headphone jack, and the girls' attentions were captured immediately. "Alright everyone, before we get onto the main event, we have a cover of a song to get us all in the mood. Are you ready to hear it?" The crowd cheered, Mina included, while her taller friend just smiled happily. Music began to play, filling the room as she pulled the microphone off its stand. "Then let's get into it. This song is called Special by an old band called Shinedown." She began to sing, a lovely angelic voice that fitted the song perfectly coming from her, and the two girls swayed in time to the music, leaning against one another for support. Suddenly, a grunting noise caught their attention and their gazes shifted over to see a girl with a heavy resemblance quietly leaning against the wall near them. "Oh, hi," Mina said, trying to shout over the overpowering music to the girl. She looked up, and just nodded a greeting before wincing. Is something the matter? Oh, are you related to the singer?" She again nodded, before wincing once. Again. Mina looked back to her friend concerned, who tilted her head in though before suddenly her eye lit up. Her arm glowed and she reached over, tapping the girl. Mina only saw them for a moment, but it was long enough for her to know that what the raven-haired girl had made was a pair of earplugs which the other girl quickly stuffed in. Thanks. I love my MOM, but these concerts always hurt my ears," she explained, and Mina frowned. "That sucks. I'm Mina, and this is Momo. It's nice to meet you. Kyoka Jairu." They had lapsed into a silence after that for a while, until the other two girls needed to take breaks themselves from the loud noises and bright lights. They'd stepped outside and the purple-haired girl had nervously followed them. She'd seemed ready to run once their eyes had landed on her, but Mina had quickly waved her over happily and they began to talk. Apparently every now and again, the girl would have to travel around to concerts with her parents, but their combined quirks greatly focused the intensity of the noise. She never told them because she didn't want to hurt their feeling thinking their music was hurting her, but it really wasn't fun for the girl. She made a comment about not really having any friends to hang out with during these times, so she had no choice but to go with, and instantly Mina had met Yairuzu's eyes, sharing a nod. "We'll be your friends." It had been impulsive really, but Mina didn't care. Because she could feel that little niggling sensation again. The one that separated her friends from her besties. Jairu was one of those people she knew she could connect with if she just tried, and so try she would. After Azui had gotten back from holiday, the other two girls had set up another meetup where the Frog Girl and Rocker Girl had met, and Ashido was excited to see she herself was finally getting proper friends she didn't have to worry about disappearing. "And because my tongue ith still growing, that why I speak funny. Ribbit," Azui explained to the pink-skinned girl as the two walked around the model solar system in the space museum the Frog Girl's parents were taking them to visit. They'd known each other for 2 months now, and Ashido would argue she'd become something of a pro at understanding the Frog Girl. A part of her was almost sad to learn it would be disappearing though. It was an adorable and quintessential part of her, and it was hard to imagine her without it. It had been dirt cheap, so there had really been no reason not to go for them as a fun day out. The Frog Girl's parents were perhaps the second most relaxed of their families, beaten out only by Jairu's parents, mainly because they literally couldn't focus on it half the time, being swamped by a mob of people trying to get autographs no matter how many times they were told, "No, not right now." "Oh, and Mom says if I really focus, one day it might be able to outshine the sun with my quirk," they overheard a feminine voice say excitedly, drawing their attention to a pair of girls who seemed to be having fun. The one who was talking seemed to be completely invisible, only her clothes even indicating she was there. She was talking to a girl with short brown hair who was listening intently as if her life depended on it, nodding along to the girl's explanations with a beaming smile. "That's so cool, Hagakure. That's better than my floating quirk." "No. Your quirk is so much cooler, and much more fitting for a place like this." The invisible girl deflected, moving in ways so animated it made her movements surprisingly easy to follow as she shook her head. "You'll be like some super cool space hero, and I'm just a flashlight no one notices otherwise." "Well, we certainly noticed you," Mina interrupted, almost instinctively as she hurried over, forcing Azui to catch up. She beamed at them both with a little wave. "Sorry, I know it's rude to interrupt, but I overheard you and I have to say my piece because they both sound like amazing powers. Mina Ashido, by the way." "Oh, Toru Hagakure. Achiko Uraraka. It's nice to meet you both." The pink-haired girl giggled, clapping her hands together happily. "This is my friend Tsu and Dash." Snap. All their eyes widened suddenly as they looked up to see one of the fake star orbs dangling from the roof began plummeting, heading right for the acid girl. Before she knew what was happening, Hagakure dived forward and pulled her out the way, and Uraraka jumped, floating the object just in time to stop it breaking and hurting anyone before letting it go. "Oh my god, Azui, Mina!" a woman called, running over to check on them. Mina, being the maiden of misadventure that she was, just started to laugh while Azui fretted over her right alongside her mother. "See," she said, pointing at Uraraka with a grin before then looking to the invisible girl still atop her. "And you didn't even need to use your power. You're both awesome already. Mina, maybe we thoud go home now. Fifth place doesn't theme safe anymore." "Ribbit," Tsuyu said with a worried gaze, her mother nodding in agreement. "Ah. Okay," she nodded, knowing there was no way to argue otherwise. Still, she didn't feel like she'd done quite enough yet for the two girls she'd just met, so she did the first thing she could think of. Momo later got on her case for giving out her number without asking, but it had seemed half-hearted. In fact, if anything, she sounded more giddy than annoyed at the prospect of more friends. For the next few months, they'd all meet up every now and again in random mixes of groups, just trying to see who could see who. Mina and Momo usually accompanying the others almost all the time. Then eventually, the day came. One none of them expected, and one none of them would ever change for anything in the future. "Tag, you're it." Ashido, wearing a black t-shirt and jeans, laughed as she tapped Uraraka, who had a simple gray NASA hoodie that reached past her knees, on the back before bolting as fast as she could from the girl, heading near the edges of Mizudafu's General Park. For the first time in a while, the whole group had managed to get together, as Momo's parents had decided to throw a party for their daughter getting into a well-respected private elementary school. Initially, the raven-haired girl, who currently donned a red dress, hadn't wanted a party at all, and really she wasn't thinking of it as one, but she hadn't stopped it once she'd seen the opportunity to turn it to her advantage. When her parents asked how she wanted the party, she'd made it very clear she didn't want any big extravaganza or formal ball. They would if she asked, she was fully aware. She just wanted to run around a park for a few hours with her friends, having fun. The biggest expense had been getting everyone to Mizudafu, the centermost point between them all. Jairu actually lived right on the fringe of the city, and the rest of the girls around it, so they decided it was the perfect place for everyone to spend some time together. Come on, Uraraka. Hagakure, wearing a frilly blue sundress complete with a hat, laughed manically as she ran circles around the poor brunette. Can't catch me. She always had been the fastest. While her invisibility was certainly useful, when it came to her physical abilities Hagakure was practically quirkless, so she always seemed to think she had a lot to prove. If they could see her, she'd probably be the most jacked little girl one could be. Mina giggled as she watched the floating girl desperately try to catch her, before then turning her attention to Momo, who laughed as she dived under the girl's hand. You can do it, Athako. I believe in you. Azui, wearing a frog-themed shirt and shorts, called while bouncing away, Jairu, who wore torn jeans and a black skull shirt clinging tightly to her back and giggling. The brunette let out a determined huff, before turning to Mina and launching at her again. Mina had been planning to dodge as a massive grin took over her face. But very quickly, it disappeared as the distant sound of crying reached her ears. She felt Uraraka tag her, but she looked away, as a voice reached her ears and she saw a green-haired boy with a blue shirt shaking as he held his fists up. He was quite clearly terrified, as he faced down three much crueler-looking boys, and behind him, an injured boy sat crying on the ground. Stop it, Kacchan. You're hurting him. One of the boys set off an explosion with a cruel grin, and that's when Mina's brain stopped processing everything properly. She just knew those three were bullies. And there was nothing Mina Ashido hated more than bullies. Wait, Mina, don't dash. Too late, the pink-skinned girl was bolting to the play park they were in, hopping the fence as the greenette's eyes screwed tight, clearly expecting to be beaten. A part of Mina registered that meant he was used to being attacked, which just brought more anger to the surface as she glared at the suddenly very confused boys. Who? The greenette muttered, in something of quiet awe as she stared them down. Leave them alone, you JRKS. At first, they had been amused at her inference. That amusement and cockiness had quickly faded faster and faster as her friends rushed to back her up, knowing they couldn't just leave her alone even if they might get in trouble. Her display of her acid had been the last nail in the coffin that had sent the two followers running for the hills, not wanting any part now they didn't expect to win, leaving only the leader, the blonde BSTRD as he'd later be referred to by the girl, to face them alone. He didn't back down like the other two. Whether it was because he was brave or stupid would depend on who you asked. Either way, he'd practically refused to acknowledge the sudden small armada around him as a threat, launching for his target anyways. Mina had lifted her hand to attack, but before she could even get a hit in, Azui's tongue, which had finally started to sort itself out, her lisp becoming much less noticeable and as a result her tongue becoming much stronger, which knocked him off course, and suddenly he let out an explosion from his hand, flying at the girls this time. You beach! He screamed, rocketing towards the pink-skinned girl. Kacchan, no! Fudeku. The following battle that ensued was hardly the legendary stuff of, well, legend, or even held the gravitas of a usual pro-hero outing, but the girls still, though they handled themselves well for an incredibly unexpected fight, all while their opponent screamed abuse and obscenities at them. He'd aimed a strike at Mina, who had her careful acid movements she'd been practicing to dodge it clumsily. He'd shot right past her and been stabbed in the leg by an earphone jack, causing him to let out a howl of pain. He stumbled back, before suddenly a strong strike to the back of his neck caused him to collapse, and all eyes turned to the floating sundress that was Hagakure. Thank you, Midoriya said, eyes wide in awe and shock. What they didn't know at the time was that his thoughts were a tornado of chaos, because these 6 angels had come out of nowhere and defeated the strongest person he knew, almost seeming to do it without effort. Thank you so much. A rustling noise grabbed all their attention and they turned to the other crying boy. Izuku's eyes widened and he tentatively reached out, looking almost afraid. Hey, are you okay? The girls had been expecting an answer, whether to yes or no. What none of them had expected was for the boy to take one look at who was asking and slap the greenette to the ground while standing up. Get away from me, you useless freak. With that, the girl's jaws dropped as the greenette twitched on the floor and the victim ran away. Mina was absolutely disgusted with the boy, but he left him to run as she quickly hurried to the green-haired boy's side as he shivered and whimpered, and she frowned gently, setting her hand on his shoulder. Hey, are you okay? Fine, he muttered sadly, pushing himself up and holding his cheek as he forced himself into a seating position. I'm used to That's horrible. Momo frowned, walking over herself and gently taking his hand down. If it weren't for the red mark from the slap helping hit it, she'd be seeing him blushing at the contact. That will bruise. Talk about a JRK. You were defending him and he does that? Uraraka asked, clearly not impressed. Her tone then turned softer as she tilted her head. Who are you anyways? Izuku Midoriya. He said with a sad sigh. But might well call him Deku. Everyone else does. Yeah, no, none of them were having that. Are you? He pondered, tilting his own head in a manner similar to Uraraka. She always made it look cute, but this boy made it downright adorable, even with a swelling cheek. I'm Mina Ashido. Thuyu Azui. Achiko Uraraka. Momo Yairuzu. Turu Hagakure. Kyoka Jairu. And nice tea, me, you. He nodded, doing his best to remember his manners. Mina frowned, gently settling a hand on his shoulders. Why did he attack you? Why would they do that to you? She asked confused, before pointing to the kid they knocked out. And what's up with Blondie? Kacchan is complicated. He sighed, looking up to the sky. He's really young. His quirk is amazing, but no one really told him what not to do. The teachers are sacred of him, and someone useless like me isn't worth listening to. Suddenly, Mina, lightly, slapped her hands onto his cheeks, staring deep into his green eyes with a fire. Hey! Don't say that, you are not useless. Izuku just looked away. Come on, what's your quirk? I bet it's something amazing. He whimpered. Having someone care, even for a moment, was nice while it lasted, but he couldn't stretch it out forever. I'm quirkless, he said quietly, and the girls all shared shocked and understanding looks at that. He flinched, looking at them as if expecting to be attacked again. But instead they all just held looks of sympathy. A moment of silence passed between them all, and when they didn't leave, Izuku's gaze turned confused. You aren't leaving? Why would we leave? Do you want me to leave? No. Are you going to hit me? Mina let out a small growl, pointing at the blonde. You, no. Him, maybe. Do you really think you're useless? Even the teachers say it. Then those teachers are idiots. Hagakure suddenly cut in, sitting in front of him. They don't know anything if they think being quirkless is the same as being useless. She's right. Jairu said lazily, twirling her earphone jack in her fingers. Quirkless people literally built our whole world, right Yamamo? Oh. Yes, they did. Even the park we're in was completely down to quirkless people from centuries ago. The raven-haired girl assured, giving him a bright grin. In fact, as far as I know, the only line of work that wasn't once dominated by quirkless people was. Their spirits fell as the boy shifted, and Momo finished quietly as the realization hit her. Hero work. That's what you want to do, isn't it? I know it's never happened before, but there's nothing I want more. He said, and suddenly Mina began to laugh. He flinched, thinking she was finally seeing him for the idiot he was. I know it's not Dash. Oh come on, enough of that. She said patiently. You tried to protect someone who wasn't even grateful from a person you were clearly terrified of. It doesn't get more heroic than that, plus it's just funny cause all of us want to be heroes too. He looked up surprised at that, and they all gave him nods with soft patient smiles to try to help him feel better. Some of them seemed like they were thinking of moving on by now, assuming their duty was done, but Mina picked up on the fact that even beyond what they saw, things must be so bad for this kid. So one couldn't blame her for doing the smallest thing she could. Want to play with us? She asked, and the boy looked surprised, before looking to the other girls to check if it was okay. Some were a little surprised by it, not really sure how they felt about playing with a boy, but one look at his hopeful gaze and they all nodded their own agreement. Can I really? Aha! Mina nodded, pulling him up onto his feet as she bounced on the heels of her own, slinging an arm around his neck and meeting the other girl's gaze. We can play heroes, so you can see what it's like to be the hero? Really? I mean, Kacchan never let me actually be the. Well, we're better than him. She said determinedly, ignoring the conflicted look that statement sent through the greenette's eyes. She turned to her friends with a smile. What do you all say? Dibs on sidekick. Jairu blurted out quickly, Uraraka following her up a moment later. Same. Then I shall play a villain. Momo decided, grabbing Hagakure. And I've got my hostage. Dang it, every time we play? Oh, I'll join you as hostage so you aren't alone. Mina said, happy to take the more boring role for her friend's sake. So Izuku, you're the hero. Let's go over to the main park though. Oh, well okay. He said, following them with the first genuinely happy smile he'd had on his face in a long time. He briefly spared a glance to the unconscious Kacchan, but he knew the boy would be fine on his own, and the greenette felt like he'd be safer from his wrath with the girls. Or at least delay it. No. Momo let out a fake fading wail as she pretended to drift unconscious from Izuku's beam attack. They'd decided to pretend he could shoot invisible beams, to give him the feeling of having a quirk to an extent, and he ran over unable to suppress a giggle as he untied the girls playing hostage. I've got you, you're safe now. He declared happily, the girls sharing smiles now that they could see the boy with a much happier grin. Hell, all of them were smiling, something about his attitude and aura was just infectious, and he'd made this whole day go from fun to unforgettable. And Mina could feel that connection again. For the moment, however, she focused on standing up and congratulating the boy with Hagakure. The invisible girl then ped her head to the side, however, a habit many of them had picked up from one of the girls. "Wait, what do we do to thank a boy hero?" she asked, as if uncertain. Mina shrugged, taking a guess. She'd watched plenty of movies, so she just did what she thought was normal, leaning and planting a kiss on the boy's cheek, causing him to blush bright red as he stood stock still. "Oh right, that. Moi." And the invisible girl followed it up with a kiss of her own, making Izuku look like he was going to faint. Once he calmed down, however, he found himself laughing alongside the girls over it all, as they just talked and relaxed for a couple of minutes. Eventually though, all good things come to an end, and this was no exception. "Girls, it's time to go," a woman shouted, walking over before looking up and stopping. "Oh, hello. I see you all made a friend." "Ah, Mom. This is Midoriya." "Nice to meet you, miss," Midoriya said with a polite bow, and the woman smiled. "Nice to meet you too. Well, at least he has good manners. Anyways, your parents will be wondering where you are by now, so it's time to take you all home." "Ah, okay," was the main thing that came from most of their mouths, though Mina quickly whirled on the spot and met Izuku's eyes. This play session had initially just been meant as a kind of one-time thing, but now she'd be dead if she lost him. 'Cause the connection was one of the strongest she'd ever had. "Do you have a phone number, Midoriya? We can all stay in touch if you do." "Oh. Yeah, hang on just a moment," he'd said, before pulling a phone out of his pocket and showing them. "My mom wants to be sure I always have a way of reaching her." He quickly gave the girls his numbers, and what none of them realized was at that moment, it had begun a bond that would never be broken no matter who tested it in the years to come. From the second they had all climbed into the Yairuzu's limousine and left Muzutafu's General Park to bring Jairu to her house, Izuku was stuck in Mina's head. The girls all talked happily with one another, and initially she was totally into the conversation as they discussed the boy and explained to the Creation Girl's mother why they were playing with him, but eventually their conversation shifted to when they might be able to meet up again, and the pink-skinned girl's response at that point rarely had more than one word. It wasn't that she wasn't interested, but the green-haired boy was in every corner of her mind at that moment, because of a key detail that hadn't occurred to her until after they were leaving. That Kacchan bully had seemed weirdly determined to be a JRK and to hurt Midoriya, and he didn't seem like the type who would take well to being humiliated. If the two boys didn't run into each other again it might work out, but they clearly knew each other somehow, which left Mina worried that something might happen to the boy. As well as that, he seemed to just not be able to comprehend the idea of someone being nice to him at first, and that didn't sit right with her at all. Vaguely registered the car pulling up to Jairu's place, and she looked up, waving bye to their purple-haired friend. Before she could step out though, Mr. Yairuzu suddenly cleared his throat. He was a lanky man in a gray suit with well-kempt hair as black as his daughter's and tired but kind eyes. He had a small scar above his lip and two piercing blue eyes. "Before I forget, girls, me and my wife have been talking with your parents about something important." This quickly caught everyone's attention, and Mina tilted her head in curiosity. Judging by the look on her face, even Momo didn't know what this was about. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a flip phone with a purple case the same shade as the earjack girl's hair, who he gave it to. "You are all clearly really close friends, and it's a shame these are the only times you get to hang out. With Momo going to that school now, she might have less chances to hang out with you all personally, and we know you all use her to talk with another." He began explaining kindly, seeing the confused look on the little girl's face. "Your parents don't think you're old enough for proper mobile phones yet, which is their call to make, but we did all agree that you should have these flips phones." As he said that, he took more out of his pockets and handed them to each girl aside from his daughter, due to her already having a red one. Mina's was bubblegum pink with a few smiley face stickers plastered on top. Everyone else's also seemed to be color-coded to their hair, with Uraraka getting a deep brown flip phone, Azui a green one, and finally Hagakure got a yellow phone. Of course, they had never seen her hair, but she always claimed it was a brilliant blonde. All of them were stunned, and Uraraka started to sputter and seemed lost on what to say, which simply amused the man. "Before any of you say anything, don't worry about the costs. Me and Mrs. Jairu are paying for the contracts for each of you happily, so just enjoy being able to talk. Knowing our kids are happy and safe has no price. Thank you so much." Jairu was the first to recover, absolutely beaming after a moment. It was a rare sight to see such a big smile on her face, and it was a moment they all treasured whenever it came along, due to how blindly bright her true smiles could be. The other girls followed with their own gratitude soon after, and the girl left once Mr. Yairuzu assured he would give the rocker girl's number to the rest of the girls. That's how they spent the rest of the ride up to Hagakure's house, the next nearest person to Mizurufu, trading numbers and making sure they worked. Mina couldn't wipe the wide grin off her face as she looked down at her contacts and saw almost all her friends there. Each of them were named and with a number, but there was still plenty of room left. Quietly, while the others talked, she decided to make a sixth contact. Izuku Midoriya. Doing her best to remember his number, she could only hope the one she got was right before she put it away to talk with her other friends all the way home. "Mom, I'm back," Izuku called as he hurried into the apartment with a soft smile. There was a cacophony of clattering a moment later before a somewhat plump woman walked out into the living room with a worried smile. He had noticed his mother was getting fatter, for lack of a better term, and he had no idea why. Whenever he asked, she would tell him not to worry about it. Maybe it was just something that happened to adults? "Welcome back, Izuku. Did you have a good day?" she asked hesitantly, and to her surprise the boy nodded. A more genuine smile came onto her face at that news and she tilted her head to the side. "Oh? What happened?" "Nothing." Izuku lied, wincing as he did. He didn't like telling his mother lies, but he knew what would happen if he didn't. He knew people didn't really like him. Kacchan had made sure he understood that much a long time ago. He had so much fun today, and he wanted to believe he now had friends. But a nagging part of his brain wouldn't stop telling him they were just being really, really nice. He knew they asked for his number, but it would be easy to forget it after or just never use it. One thing was for sure, he didn't want to get his mother's hopes up because he knew it would hurt her more than him if he told her. "Nothing happened, so it was a good day?" Inko asked with a slight hint of concern in her voice. Izuku just let out a noise of affirmation before heading for the couch and pulling out a notebook, turning on the TV. He missed the elder Midoriya's frown. Well, okay, I guess. Dinner will be ready in about half an hour." "Thanks, Mom," Midoriya said, as he turned to the news and kept an eye out for any new hero debuts. This was how he always spent his first hour home, looking for any new pros who he could take notes on. As he watched this time, however, somewhere in the back of his mind he couldn't help but picture the girls he met before as pros. He didn't even realize when he stopped writing actual notes and just started doodling the girls in ideas for costumes. He only stopped when his phone suddenly went off, and he saw he had a text from an unknown number. Mina looked at her new phone sitting on her bed with a glare, as she mentally considered what she was planning to do. She really, really wanted to talk with Izuku again already, but a part of her worried a little. What if that scares him off? He seems like he could be easily spooked and I don't want to creep him out, but I really want to talk to him. She shook her head, just grabbing it and quickly going through until she found the boy's contact. She paused for just a moment, before composing her message. "Hi, it's Mina. From the park. How are you?" She waited anxiously for a reply, staring at the screen intently in hopes she'd get a quick response even though that was unlikely. Just when she was about to give up hope on getting one though, a message came through. "Izuku Midoriya, Ashido? You're texting me?" "Ashido, yeah. Of course, why wouldn't I?" "Izuku Midoriya, I thought you only asked for my number to be nice." "No. You were so cool. Why wouldn't I want to talk with you?" "Izuku Midoriya, you mean that?" Yeah. I really want to meet you again. I want to be friends." "Izuku Midoriya, me too." I got a phone, so want to tack?" "Izuku, yes please." Mina's grin grew wide and happy, as they began to just talk. Nothing in particular, just interests and what she and the girls did. She was interested when he mentioned he was taking notes on heroes and got to see just a few of them. Before either of them even knew it, night was falling as they talked about meeting again someday, and Mina's consciousness began to slip, a dopey smile on her face. In Izuku's house, he found himself in a similar predicament on the couch, lying down and starting to lose his grasp on the waking world. The happiest smile he'd had in a long time adorned on his face. He'd been the first to say goodnight, knowing he was close to passing out. So close in fact that he practically fell into the realm of dreams at the same time he pressed send, dropping his phone onto the floor in the process. The sound attracted the attention of his mother, who had hurried through and picked it up. The plump woman had only intended to put it somewhere safe, but upon seeing he was texting someone she had paused. She'd never known him to text anyone but her, and of course curiosity got the better of her as she sat down, going through the messages and deciphering them the best she could. That was why had anyone been walking by their apartment at that moment, they would have heard a sharp and happy cry. "My baby has friends." Izuku hates school. He hated the crowds, the teachers who ignored you when something happened to you but rushed around for everyone else, the students who would abuse that fact. And of course, there was Kacchan. Izuku always dreaded returning to school, but now he was practically on the verge of having an anxiety attack over it, as he stared up at the intimidating building. Somewhere within, he'd eventually find a blonde who would be none too happy to see him, and he already knew what would be coming. With shallow breaths, he still began to make his way inside. As much as he hated it, he knew there was no way around it. Boom. Way more suddenly than the greenette could have expected, an explosion went off in his face and there was a sudden painful impact on his stomach, brining him to his knees. He was thrown to the floor a moment later, and he felt a foot come down on his head and bring tears to his eyes. "You think I would have let you get away with that stunt, Deku?" The foot landed on his nose, and he felt a crack. "You are nothing, you bastard." Katsuki screamed, before setting off more explosions on the boy and burning him in the process. Kacchan stop. Midoriya cried out, in pain and fear, but for his efforts he only got a kick in the ribs, causing him to let out a pained cry. "It hurts. It's what you deserve, you pathetic sheet. Need some stupid girls to defend you, Deku. If those fuckers hadn't come out of nowhere, I'd make sure they knew just how stupid it is to side with you." Another kick, and a sad and worried thought barely registered in the child's brain. "Maybe I shouldn't meet them. So Kacchan doesn't." He couldn't even finish the thought before a fist to the head finally broke his grip on consciousness. Midoriya groaned as his eyes blinked open, and he looked around. He frowned as he realized where he was pretty quickly, feeling his body ache with pain. His eye in particular felt really weird and overblown. The school infirmary, a place he had to come to all too often and a place he hated. A shuffling noise brought his attention the school nurse, whose gaze hardened immediately upon seeing him. "Oh good, you're finally awake. Hopefully your mother will be here soon so you can stop wasting space," she said harshly, making Midoriya flinch. That was one of the two reasons Midoriya hated being here so much. The nurse seemed to think he was nothing more than a waste of air leeching of her work for some reason. The other was simply just that if he ended up here, it meant Katsuki was in a terrible mood. With that thought, he frowned and turned to look for his stuff, knowing he had it on him when he was beaten up. "Stupid brat, staring fights you can't win," the nurse muttered angrily, and Midoriya sighed. Of course that's how Kacchan would have framed it. It didn't matter, all evidence pointed to the contrary, it only mattered that they believed the version of events. That wouldn't get the blonde in any trouble. Midoriya reached for his bag, seeing it at his bedside. He reached out for it and missed? He tried again and once again missed before finally getting it the third time. Once he did, he put it on the bed and quickly pulled out his phone, feeling his eye ache. Oh. He opened the camera on the device, flipping it around to his face and letting out a small gasp. He had a black eye, and a scar under his nose. His arms were littered with burns near the top and he knew there would be more bruises on his stomach. He sighed, closing the camera and frowning as he idly tapped through the phone. He hadn't actually turned it on until just now, having been in a hurry to get ready for school. He noticed the notification for a text message and opened it up, finding Mina had sent him a message around the same time he had been getting beaten. "Mina, want to go to the amusement park next week? Momo got tickets." Bakugo's words flashed through his head, and he winced as he began to type out a response. He had to say no, right? He couldn't be friends with someone if they were going to get hurt for it, and it's not like they needed him. They were amazing, and he was just some Deku, so it made sense to say no. Despite that, however, he couldn't bring himself to say no. If you want me to be there, then okay." He let out a sigh as the response sent. He'd just have to do what he could to not let Bakugo know. The following Friday. Izuku was quiet as he weaved his way through the crowd, Mother smiling behind him as she helped him to squeeze through and get to the gate. She'd been incredibly excited when he'd told her, and had for some reason even almost ended up crying when the greenette mentioned they were girls. He'd been worried he'd done something wrong, but she'd been quick to assure him they were happy tears. He was wearing a long-sleeved t-shirt and trousers to hide his new marks. He couldn't do anything about the eye, sadly. It didn't take them long to find the girls, Mina making the group stand out massively. As soon as the boy got close, they noticed him and Mina bolted at him, throwing her arms around his neck, which he returned awkwardly in surprise. "Midoriya. Hi, Ashido," he said quietly, admittedly enjoying the warmth of the embrace. A moment later she pulled away and the other girls waved at him, which he returned shyly. "It's nice to see you again. Ribbit," Azui said with a happy croak, and to everyone's surprise for some reason that alone managed to make the greenette blush. "It's nice to see you too," he said, an odd look on his face as if he was confused about something. He shook his head though, deciding to ignore it. For some reason, she just made him feel good when she talked to him. "Wait, hang on," Uraraka suddenly called, bounding up to him with a frown before gasping. "Why do you have a black eye?" "Huh?" Momo asked, walking over herself before frowning. "Oh dear, that doesn't look good." "It's nothing," he said, waving it away. Jay just ran into a door. It was better to tell them that than to tell them Bakugo did it, he thought, for two reasons. The first was that he didn't want them confronting Bakugo over it, even though he found it unlikely they would, because he wanted to keep them away from him, and on top of that he didn't want to make them feel bad. That doesn't look like a door, did it? Hagakure muttered suspiciously to herself, but they fortunately seemed to decide to let it go for now. Well, anyways, we should let you know we have access to every ride, as long as we're the right age. Momo said to the greenette with a soft smile, handing him a ticket. Jairu then spoke up from where she was sitting, twirling her earjacks in her hands. We said we'd take turns picking rides, and we agreed to let you choose first when you got here, she said, before smiling softly at the greenette's confused face. Yeah? Why me? Well, because you're the new girl, guy, Mina said as if it was obvious, before giving him a somewhat more serious look. Plus, you could use it. He didn't quite understand what she meant by that, but at their expectant looks he quickly turned to the rides, and decided to start small. Can we go on the teacups? I need to work my way up. Yay! I love those, Hagakure said happily, suddenly bounding forward and taking the boy's hand, and as well as the nearest girl's, which happened to be Mina, trying to pull them along. Let's go! Hagakure, wait, Momo called out to her, before sighing and smiling with amusement and exasperation when the invisible girl didn't listen. The group quickly made their way after the kids, while Inko approached the people looking after the girls to talk. Soon enough, they were all sat on a single teacup, Izuku sandwiched in between Jairu and Hagakure, with all of them giggling as it began to pick up speed. Mina giggled happily, and the young boy among them looked on all their happy faces, before smiling to himself. He was really glad he didn't say no, because something about getting to see these girls so happy just felt right. He felt a slight pressure on his side as they began to turn the corner, and suddenly he had Jairu's head on his shoulder, though not by her choice. Still, he couldn't say he was against it. Having fun, Midoriya? Ribbit? Azui asked, tilting her head as she did, and he looked up to answer her. As soon as his eyes landed on her, the words died in his throat, however, as his stomach felt weird. Like there were butterflies flying about inside him. Huh? Was she this pretty last time? Midoriya? Sorry, yeah I am, he said happily, face once again more red, much to the other girl's concern. Are you sure you're alright? You're flush? Momo asked, concerned, and he nodded. Not used to amusement parks fully, he said, because that's what it must have been, right? He was just adjusting to this kind of place was all. Well, okay. The raven-haired girl decided to accept that, as the ride began to slow down and they all clambered off, most of the girls giggling happily as they came down. Oh, let me pick next, please, Uraraka asked hopefully, and after a moment of waiting the others let her go ahead, so she pointed to a nearby area filled up with trampolines. Those are awesome. It's like being weightless but no throwing up. The other girls giggled and Izuku just looked on confused. Was that an in-joke he didn't get? Why would being weightless make someone throw up? Alright, let's go, Mina said excitedly, beginning to walk when a sudden loud rattling noise got all their attention, a roller coaster near to them speeding past with people screaming. Ah? Midoriya suddenly shouted himself at the sudden noise, arms instinctively coming up to his head and causing the girls to all look to him concerned. Midori? Hagakure asked with a worried tone, and he looked up with heartbreaking frightened eyes. Before anyone else could say anything to the sight, the creation girl among them walked up to him and frowned softly with a look in her eyes as if she'd figured out a puzzle. You're scared of the rides? She asked simply, and he looked away as his face turned crimson once more, but this time it was clearly out of embarrassment. He nodded to confirm it. Why? It's stupid, he said, flinching at how pathetic he probably sounded. It's not stupid to be scared of something, especially if you have good reason, she assured him, putting a gentle hand on his shoulder. Why did it scare you? The loud noises, he admitted in his quietest voice. As soon as he did, however, Mina finally took initiative herself, bounding up to him and pulling him into a right hug. Ah? Well then I'll stick with you the whole time, okay? She said with a bright smile. None of it can hurt you, 'cause I won't let it. Me neither, Uraraka said happily, coming up onto his other side. We'll stay by your side while we're walking and everything will be fine, okay? A soft smile came onto the boy's face. It was such a small act, but it did make him feel so much better. Thank you. What are friends for? The pink-skinned girl asked with a smirk, before they all set off again. Think you can handle the trampolines? It's all right to say no if you need to. I think I'll wait to the side, he said, as they approached, and the girls nodded in understanding. Hope you can enjoy the next thing we go on then. Ribbit. Azui croaked happily, once more making Midoriya feel odd inside, but he nodded with a smile. He felt dopey whenever she addressed him for some reason. I'll stay with you while the others go on then. Jairu suddenly spoke up, walking up to him as the others took their place at the back of the line, Mina and Uraraka reluctantly letting go of him. I'm not too great with trampolines. Ah, fair enough. Uraraka pouted, shaking with excited energy as she got closer to the trampolines in the line. We'll see you soon. See you soon. Both Jairu and Izuku called out together as the girls moved along in the line, before they just turned and stared into the park. The greenette felt a sudden pressure on his wrist and turned to see Jairu awkwardly holding it in an attempt to make up for Mina and Uraraka being gone. I'm not great with boys and hugging and that. She explained quietly, looking away. Sorry. That's fine, it's nice to have someone at all. Izuku waved away the issue, before smiling brightly. And thanks for staying with me at all. You didn't have to. But I wanted to. Jairu said with a smile of her own, before clearing her throat. Why do you keep acting all weird when Azui talks to you? I don't know. He admitted, scratching his head in confusion. I feel funny when she talks to me. Like you're going to be sick? Jairu asked with a frown, and the greenette quickly shook his head. No, I feel really good actually. Just weird. Like there is butterflies trying to escape from inside me, I guess. He did his best to put the feelings into words, and the purple-haired giggled at the mental image. Maybe you should ask your mom, or the Yairuzus. They might know. She said, and he nodded. Maybe he would. I've been meaning to ask by the way, why were you at the park when we first met? Huh? What do you mean? He asked confused, tilting his head to the side. You were there alone, right? I doubt you would have gone there with those bullies. She said, and the boy sighed sadly. No, it's close to my house, so I just like to spend time there sometimes. Kacchan also lives kinda nearby though, so he also goes there and we just kinda met that time. He explained, causing Jairu to frown. Then, suddenly her eyes went wide. Wait, you live close to the park? She asked, and he nodded. A smile then broke out on her face and she leaned a little more into him in her sudden excitement. Then we live close to each other. Really? Midoriya asked surprised, and she nodded enthusiastically. Like we're right near that beach, Dagoba. We should totally meet up sometime. She said happily, and a dopey smile did make its way onto Izuku's face this time. Like even just hanging out at the park for a bit could be fun. I'd like that. He admitted, and she made sure to get his number off him this time so they could plan such a meet-up. Soon enough following that, the girls finally got off and Uraraka and Mina had quickly taken back up their posts of holding on to the boy, but anyone who was paying attention would have noticed Jairu remaining just that little bit closer to him through it all. In fact, from the moment they all set off from the trampolines until the moment they all finally had to leave, there wasn't a single instance where at least one of the girls wasn't hugging the greenette or holding his hand. Izuku smiled as he walked into the park alone, sun shining bright in the sky as he spotted a head of purple hair. Jairu. Huh? Oh. Hey Midoriya. She greeted with a small smile, waving to him as he hurried over to her. You doing okay? Huh. My mom made a really nice breakfast for us and I'm really excited to see you. He blurted out without a care, making the purple-haired girl blush a tiny bit as she smirked. I'm excited to see you too. What do you want to do? She asked, curious what he would pick. The actual child's park was a bit small. There was a sandpit, some climbing bars, a swing and a slide. Aside from that they had a big open field to themselves. Izuku was able to wander freely here as Inko wasn't too far at all, ready to come running at a moment's notice, and Jairu, well, her parents perhaps had gotten a little too used to letting their little girl roam free. I really like the slide. It's so fun with the wind. He giggled, before a contemplative look came onto his tiny face and he hummed, smiling at her. What about you? I bet you'd look really pretty with the wind in your hair. Yeah. Jairu was caught off guard by that, but a small smile came onto her face. She wasn't used to being called pretty, but she didn't dislike it and quickly stammered out a reply. Thanks, you too. It took a moment for her exact wording to sink in and she bit her tongue. No, isn't it insulting to call a boy pretty? I mean, I know it's a compliment to me, but Really, you think I'd be pretty? He asked, and his voice was surprisingly earnest, as if he was hopeful for her to confirm her statement. Not wanting to disappoint him, that was exactly what she did with a nod, and he smiled an unfairly bright smile. Yay! I'd like to be pretty. It's nice knowing someone thinks good things like that about me. Jairu frowned for a moment, put off by the phrasing of that, before grabbing his hand. Neither failed to notice she'd taken a more genuine grip on it than her simply tugging of his wrist at the amusement park. Well, come on then. Let's go on the swings first, so we can see each other with the wind. She laughed, pulling him along, and he grinned as they both came up to the two swings. Jairu was a little smaller than Izuku, so he helped her up with a small blush, before running around and giving her a push. It gave her a very small boost, slow and barely noticeable, but after a few Izuku ran to the other swing and jumped up on his own, barely able to push off the ground. Soon enough though, they both began to pick up speed with shared excited giggles. Izuku stole a glance to his side and was rather stunned by exactly how angelic the purple-haired girl looked as her hair whipped around and with that perfect content smile on her face. She noticed his staring after a moment and flashed him a somewhat embarrassed grin. "What? Something the matter?" "No, just I was right," he said, smiling brightly, and she let out a noise like a squeak before responding. "So was I." She giggled, before grinning more cockily. "Hey Midoriya, watch this." Confused, he watched her soar higher and higher into the sky, his anxiety growing with the height she got. Then, his heart leapt to his throat and his eyes went wide as she suddenly launched off her seat and forward through the air. "Ah, Jairu," he shouted in concern, both hands instinctively coming up off his swing supports and reaching out for her. Then his entire body, for the briefest of moments, felt different. Like his very core was trying to reach out. But then she stuck the landing, and though relieved the feeling faded and left him off balance, as he fell forward and ended crashing into the ground. He pushed up with a small hiss and pained expression as his shirt got its sleeve caught on a part of the ground and began to tear. "Ah! Midoriya, look out!" His friend tried to warn him, but it was too late, as he pushed up while the swing was still going with plenty of momentum. Thwack! Ah! He let out a pained cry, being thrown to the ground once more. Kyoka bolted over, grabbing the swing quickly and doing her best to make it a non-issue before hurrying to his side with worried eyes. Her heart hurt when she saw the tears beginning to form in his emerald orbs. "Ow ow ow ow! I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have scared you. This is my fault." The girl hastily began apologizing, and even through his pain he tried to fix her with a reassuring look that was somewhat brought down by the large tears beginning to flow down her face. "I got to make up for this. It's fine." He hiccuped, not exactly doing a great job of hiding his pain as he grabbed the back of his head and his eyes shut tight. It was an accident. Don't feel bad, I am sorry for dash. Moi." He suddenly stopped, eyes opening and going wide as his face heated up a little, feeling a pair of lips press briefly against the back of his head where he had been hit. "Jairu? Sorry." She suddenly apologized, worried she did something wrong as she blushed herself and looked away. "My mom always kisses my bruises better, so I thought it would help. I would have got a Shido or Uraraka to do it, but they aren't here and it's so weird, and I was the reason you got hurt and dash." "Thank you," he said quietly, gently holding her wrist but not doing more. "It helps." "I'm glad." She managed a small smile after he fixed her with one of his own, doing her best to calm down. Her eyes wandered as she tried to think of what to do now, and her smile quickly shifted to a frown as her eyes widened upon seeing his now exposed arm. "Why do you have burns?" She recognized the type of injury by sheer happenstance, having seen her own mother suffer from burns a few times when she got overly confident in her cooking skills. Huh? "Ah. It's he didn't give a straight answer, looking away as if scared. Kacchan?" she asked, barely remembering the blonde's name from their very first meeting. He gave a stiff and reluctant nod and she sighed, very nervously wrapping her arms around her neck and causing him to let out a surprised squeak. "Jairu? Though you didn't like hugs with boys. I want to change that," she said simply, admittedly feeling weird, but she didn't let go. He needed the support, and without Mina or Achiko, she had to do what she could. That was what a hero's job was, right? A thought occurred to her, and she decided to ask a question she had been wanting to ask the other girls for a while. "And Midoriya?" "Yeah," he asked, as she finally pulled away and he finally began to look like he was starting to feel better, something Jairu was happy to see. Could you call me Kyoka?" she asked nervously, and the greenette tilted his head in surprised confusion. Huh? But Mom says calling people by their first name is rude," Izuku said with a frown, and she began to fidget as she looked away. "Only if they don't let you." I want to change to my first name with the other girls. I think I should see if it works with you first though, please? Just say it so I can see if I'm okay with it," she asked, and the greenette nodded after a moment. He couldn't exactly refuse such a sincere request. "Okay, Kyoka," he said, and silence was all that was between them for a moment before a large smile worked its way onto the purple-haired girl's face. "Thank you," she said with her voice the most genuine it had been so far. She'd worried it would feel weird for her to hear Izuku call her it and have to wait ages before she could feel comfortable with it. But as her name left his lips, something about it just made the world feel right for a moment. But then you have to be allowed to call me Izuku, otherwise it isn't fair." The greenette said very seriously, wanting to do his best to make up for the perceived rudeness even if she was encouraging it. "Oh, okay then, Izuku," she said, still smiling, and he smiled back. She looked up and grinned for a moment, looking around. "Want to go on the slide now? I'll let you go first." "Yes please," he said, scrambling up almost like he'd forgotten about his earlier pain and helping her up as well, seeming to refuse not having her close to his side as they moved for the slide. They continued to play together for hours, until the sun was finally beginning to get close to setting and they knew they'd have to make their ways to their homes soon. Kyoka, determined to make the most of their time however, had pulled him away from the kids' area into the open field, taking him to under a nearby tree with a huge smile on her face. It was slow but she was starting to feel more okay with grabbing his hand at least, even if hugging still seemed a far way off thanks to their moments from earlier. "So what are we doing now?" Izuku asked in confusion and she giggled, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small device similar to a phone. "Oh wow! Is that an MP3? I thought those were super hard to get. My mom and dad got for me last year for my birthday." Jairu explained with a smile, patting the grass beside her. "I want to know what kind of music you like, Izuku." "Huh? But how will we?" As if already predicting his question, she took out a headphone splitter and plugged it into the device, before plugging in her own ear jack to one end and handing her headphones to the greenette who gracefully took them. Thank you," he said, sitting beside her with their backs against the tree for support. She held the device up so they both could see the screen. Izuku let out a small gasp as he saw some of the titles. She certainly wasn't expecting the excited question that came from him. "You like all these songs as well?" he asked, grinning wide. He recognized most of them from the ones his mother had saved on her phone to let him listen to or from videos online. "You know them?" Jairu asked, her own eyes glistening with excitement at the prospect. He nodded happily and she shoved the audio device towards him. "Oh, show me your favorite." Okay." He nodded, scrolling through them. A few he didn't recognize and it was possible a few he did but didn't know the spelling of and bypassed them, but eventually he came across a song he happily began to let play out into both their ears. An old English song, but a classic that they both had heard many times before. "Lately I've been losing sleep. Dreaming about the things that we could be dash." Content smiles formed on both their faces as the song played from there, both humming along to the tune with closed eyes and happy faces right up until its eventually conclusion, leading into another song. In fact, they ended humming a majority of the songs together and even the few Izuku didn't know Kyoka seemed to be able to make up for. With her joy for the music practically being contagious, he'd quickly found himself enjoying a lot of the music even if not all of it was to his personal taste. All in all, as they hummed together and unconsciously shifted closer to one another, partially to make the headphones less taut and partially just out of a desire to do so, they continued to hum and sometimes even sing. Sadly though, all good things must come to an end and this was no exception as the purple-haired girl needed to start making her way home soon enough before the sky turned dark. "I had a lot of fun today, Izuku." "Me too, Kyoka. You'll be okay going home, right?" he asked with concern and she giggled, grabbing his hand and squeezing it to his surprise. "I'll be fine. Oh, before I forget, did you find out what your whole thing with Azui was?" Kyoka wondered, and Izuku frowned with a shake of the head. "Mom just kind of freaked out before refusing to tell me, saying I had to figure it out on my own." "That's weird." "Oh well." She began to walk off, and the greenette hummed with quiet worry. Can we do this again sometime?" he asked, and she looked back with massive grin. "Duh. This was too much fun not to do again. And we can probably get together sooner than we could with the other girls anyways, so not like it's going to be long if you don't want it to be." She laughed, and he smiled, but his eyes betrayed his illogical but ever-present fear that they might just forget them. While Kyoka didn't know that was what he was thinking, she still noticed his face and sighed before running over to him while pulling out her phone. "Well, just one more hug won't hurt, right?" "Yeah, Kyoka," he asked confused, as suddenly an arm wrapped around his neck and she pulled out her phone, pointing the camera at them. Both their faces were nervous and red but smiling as the phone clicked and the picture was taken. He laughed and she began to move away. "Text you soon, Izuku." "You too, Kyoka." With that, they finally went their separate ways with massive grins on their faces. Jairu, guys. I'm worried about Izuku. He has burns. Uraraka, what? That's horrible. Yaoyorozu, oh dear. That is not good. Hagakure, we should do something for him, it's not good. Asue, but what? You, Momo? Do you have any ideas? Momo, well, 1. We need to train to be pro heroes in the future, but mother says we should just play games for now in place of training. Midoriya likes heroes. Maybe we should just play games together while training, and that might help him when we cannot be there? Uraraka, that's so SMRT. Hagakure, yeah. Momo, thank you. If one of you contact him, I can see if there is any time I will be free in future? Mina smiled as she looked at her phone, stars twinkling in the sky outside as bright as her smile at the prospects of seeing all her friends together and getting another chance to hang out with Midoriya. She promised as she snuggled up in her bed, to do everything in her power to help save him from whatever his problem was. Because that's what a hero would do. Izuku sprinted through Muzutafu General Park, a determined smile on his face as he weaved away from Momo who was chasing him. I'm going to get you, Midoriya, she called in a sing-song voice with a little giggle at the end, only making the greenette's smile grow wider as he picked up the pace. They were playing a game Ishido had suggested, a variation of tag that was proving to be really fun. Izuku would have been down for any game they suggested really though, excitement and curiosity peaked as soon as they said they were doing it as training for becoming heroes. He'd been a little worried at first that he'd have to sit and watch without playing, seeing as he was quirkless, but that had quickly been proven wrong when Kyoka had hurried over to him, performing the actions needed to start the game. I'm still ahead. He called back with a small laugh, before suddenly his foot caught in the dirt and he fell forward, rolling through the grass. He heard sudden worried shouts as he sat up, the girls running to him. Ah, are you okay, Midoriya? Uraraka asked, worry evident in her voice as she crouched down near him that was matched by the expression on her face, mirrored on the other girls as well. He nodded with a small laugh however, not hurt at all. Yeah, I'm fine. He assured with a smile, the adrenaline still running through him. Relieved to see he was all right, the girls returned his smile with their own as Momo leaned down near him. Then she pressed her finger right onto his nose. Boop! She called, giggling afterwards. I win. That was the boop game. It was almost exactly like tag, except you had to tap the person right on the nose. Nowhere else counted, and you had to say boop. Anyone who was booped was eliminated. It seemed Momo was proving to be the queen of the game, followed up only by Mina. Ah, drat. The greenette complained with a put while the others giggled, taking seats around him. We should probably take a break for now. The tallest of them said, sat right beside Izuku with a smaller smile than his own but no less genuine. So I hope that was fun for us all? Yeah, really fun. They all sung their praise while the raven-haired girl blushed a bit at it, happy her game was being well received. Izuku let out a hymn as he turned to face her. It's meant to make us faster, right? He asked, as you could see the gears of his mind turning. The girl nodded, before suddenly they all saw the boy put his hand to his chin, the distant look in his eyes almost making it seem as if he'd suddenly disconnected from the real world. Then he began muttering. Well, that makes sense, we're working on our leg muscles as long as we do, and eventually as a pro you'd probably end up having to run from a villain, avoiding being caught, so it makes sense to work on that in a safe way. Then of course there's also being the chaser, as you will also need to be prepared to go after a villain at a moment's notice. Though they won't just stop if you catch them like here dash. Suddenly, his eyes lit up again and he looked around at the facial expressions of his friends before his own turned sheepish as he scratched the back of his neck. Sorry. I have a bad habit of muttering. I didn't annoy you, did I? What? No. Hagakure called, bajooning forward, and he felt two arms snake around his neck even if he couldn't feel them. That was so cute. Yeah. Uraraka supplied, pumping her fist into the air. And it made sense. I think. Momo, did it make sense? It did. The tall girl giggled, tilting her head to the side with a smile. And it was really smart. That did make the quirkless boy's cheeks tinge red even as he returned the smile. He was also glad to see the girls okay with referring to each other by their first names. Kyoka had brought it up when they had all gathered and they had jumped onto the idea pretty quickly, the others also switching to first names. The only one who hadn't made the switch was Izuku, as he didn't feel right to considering he'd only met them recently. Oh. Hey guys, I have an idea. Mina piped up excitedly, pulling Azui into a sideways hug with one arm. We all want to be heroes, right? Let's come up with hero names. Izuku's eyes practically sparkled with excitement, hands gripping tight. This is what he lived for. Then he considered the names he had in mind and suddenly he flushed red, suddenly very aware how most of them sounded. Now he'd have to share them with someone other than his mom. But it would be impolite not to share. Hang on. He said, standing up and hurrying to where their bags were. He rummaged around inside, finding a notebook and hurrying back to his friends who all had curious expressions on their faces. I write a lot of stuff about heroes down. I think I have some in here. Oh. That's so cool. Uraraka beamed, before turning to the frog girl beside her. Oh, Tsu, you told me a while ago you already had a name picked out, right? Yeah, Ribbit. It's going to be Froppy. The girl said with her own bright smile that made her practically radiate with cuteness. Izuku felt his face heat up again, as his chest seemed to tighten a little seeing her, but his nerdy side won out over his usual confusion and embarrassment. Ah, that's so cool, I love that. He gushed, quickly grabbing the pencil that he always had in the side of the notebook and flipping to a new page writing it down. Hey, what are you doing, dude? Kyoka asked curiously, leaning over to get a better look. Oh, I keep entries for notes on pro heroes. If I can't have powers, I can have knowledge instead. He explained with a more sad smile, looking to the grass. That's one of the only quotes they had from a pro hero I think is really cool was. Eraserhead, he's the closest thing to a quirkless pro. I've never heard of him. The purple-haired girl frowned, trying to recall that name at all. Me neither. Hagakure hummed, the other girls quickly following up with their own lack of knowledge about the supposed pro. Yeah, he's an underground? I think that's right. He's an underground hero. The greenette explained. So he's super secret and stuff. Oh, he's like a spy. Mina supplied, getting a small chuckle from the others, while Izuku flipped to the front of his notebook where the names were listed. Kyoka picked up on them immediately as a grin came onto her face. Mighty Junior? Small Might? Mighty Boy? She read out, making him blush bright as she snickered. Oh god, they're going to think I'm stupid or obsessed or maybe they'll dash. Ow! He suddenly hissed, leaning forward and clutching his head with a whimper. Caught off guard by this, the other girls quickly hurried to his side. He felt someone grab his arm, presumably Kyoka, and he clutched his head. Midoriya, are you okay? Momo asked concerned, kneeling near him and trying to inspect his head for any external injuries. I am fine. He assured, frowning as the pain began to subside. It just happens sometimes. If I think too hard, that's not normal. The tall raven-haired girl muttered under her breath, with a concerned tone. Is there anything we can do to help? And not as far as I know. He sighed, grimacing. He'd been putting up with this since he'd been diagnosed as quirkless, so he was used to it, but it still was far from enjoyable. The girls traded glances, no one really sure what to do until Mina made her way over and leaned forward. Moi. Aishido? I know it's not much, but I hope it helps at least a little. She explained, gently wrapping her arms around his neck as Kyoka had done moments prior. Thank you. He sighed, smiling despite himself even as his face got stuck on the tomato setting. See, can we go back to hero names? It's not a big deal. None of them were convinced, but seeing as he asked they wouldn't deny him. The others sat down and Mina's eyes wandered, before a hum left her. Hey, isn't that the woman who got in trouble for her costume recently? The pink-skinned girl pondered, seeing the very first entry in the book was one of a pro hero called Midnight. Oh, yeah. Mom barely let me put her down, only because I begged basically. The greenette chuckled a little, having had to use his best puppy dog eyes on her. She has a really cool quirk, she can put people to sleep with a gas. Oh, that sounds useful. Ribbit. Azui croaked, putting a finger to her chin. You could be a sleepover hero. That would be fun. Uraraka laughed at her side with a bright smile. They're the best, I'd love to be able to have them all the time. I don't think her power quite allows that. Momo pointed out with a small laugh, while Izuku frowned. Hagakure was the first to pick up on it, quickly piping up on seeing his expression. What's wrong, Midoriya? Do you not like sleepovers? What? Mina demanded, sounding horrified as she grabbed his shoulders. How can you not like sleepovers? It's not that I don't like them. I've never been to one to know. He quickly explained, before watching as looks of horror appeared on all their faces. Unacceptable, mister. Uraraka called, hurrying over to him. Everyone needs to go to a sleepover at some point. Right, guys? Yes. You bet. Ribbit. Of course. Oh, we have to set one up now. We can't not. Kyoka surprisingly brought up, crossing her arms. I didn't know what they were either, we can't have him missing out. Momo, can we set up for another one soon? Izuku could only watch in bewilderment and joy, as his friends began setting to work, planning it all out. And then a bright smile came onto his face. I'm going to have my first sleepover. To say Inko had been ecstatic when she found out her son wanted to have a sleepover with his friends, it would be an understatement. She would have screamed for joy if not for the fact she didn't want to destroy his eardrums, so instead she'd settled for hugging him tight and promising that of course he could have them come over. She would rather die than deny him actual friendship. And it seemed she was quickly finding lots and lots of information proving that that was the right choice as the night went on. She more than happily worked away in the kitchen, making sure the food could be used as leftovers. For them all tomorrow while the kids sat on the couch in the living room, watching hero movies. The current one on was a rather cheesy one that was honestly pretty bad, one about All Might of course. Still, as they were kids they were absolutely loving every second of it, so she couldn't complain. She had the girls' parents' numbers from the day at the amusement park, and she was keeping each of them updated every hour or so with pictures of their children hanging out, along with profusely thanking them all for letting them come over. "Oh, then he'll do a Detroit smash. I just know it," Izuku said excitedly, completely into the movie as he rocked back and forth with nervous excited energy on the mattress that had been moved to the living area. Mina on one side of him, Kyoka and Momo on the other. Azui and Hagakure were sitting on the seat nearby and Hagakure was happily sitting on the floor so she could reach her drinks faster and be closer to the TV. After all they could just look through her so she wasn't in the way. "Of course you know, you've seen it before," Mina pointed out with a laugh, getting a more sheepish laugh from the greenette and giggles from the other girls. "Oh yeah. I forgot. You really like All Might, huh?" Uraraka asked him, taking her attention away to the boy. "Of course. He's my idol. I may be quirkless, but I want to be like him anyways." Saving people with a smile. Inko smiled sadly, stirring around food in the pot before her as she let out a sad sigh. She still felt guilty she couldn't support him in that dream like she could, but at least now she could hope that the girls could make up for her where she failed, even if she didn't want her baby in danger. Shaking her head, she'd returned her attention to cooking for the next while, barely paying attention the sound of the movie to see where they were. She'd watched it with Izuku so many times she knew the corny dialogue off by heart. "Halt there, evil doer. You cannot escape justice. Oh yeah, and you can't escape my death ray, All Might. Die, symbol of peace." She rolled her eyes, turning her attention back to the kids, the girls enraptured in the movie. She couldn't see her son's reaction but she would have guessed he had a massive smile on his face as he was absorbed in as well. She was proven wrong rather quickly however, as quiet sobs reached her ears and the girls turned, before their eyes widened. "Midoriya?" Momo asked worried, leaning over to him. "What's the matter? Are you hurt?" "And no, I am not sad," he said through the crying, breaking the mother's heart but she didn't rush immediately. Something in her instincts told her to wait this time as the boy continued talking. I'm happy." "You're crying because you're happy?" Azui asked in confusion, concern in her eyes. "Why yeah. I guess I just realized. I really have friends now. I actually have you guys," he explained, making the mother clench her fists tight as her chest ached. "Oh Izuku." The girls seemed to have similar sentiments, as they all hurried over to him, quickly forgetting the movie as they pulled him into one big group hug. While she wasn't seen, she pulled out her phone and snapped a quick picture, unable to help herself after seeing the soft, content smiles on all their faces. After a while, when she'd heard no more peeps from the kids she'd come through and she'd found what was officially the most adorable sight she'd seen in her life. The hug pile hadn't broken up at all, which meant they probably all fell asleep like that. Izuku was in the middle of them all, with Kyoka and Uraraka having fallen asleep with their heads against his shoulders. Mina had fallen asleep at an angle, her head resting on the greenette's stomach and perhaps Hagakure's head was also there, as her clothes made it clearly she had fallen asleep in between her son's legs. Azui was definitely there, head against his thigh as she slept at a similar angle as Mina. Finally, behind them all was Momo with her arms wrapped around the greenette, as though holding him away from any danger that could come after him. Inko took a few deep breaths after seeing the sigh. She could do this, she could survive the one sleepover. A rustling noise caught her attention and she watched Mina turn in her sleep, hand settling atop her son's as a smile came onto her face, a matching one appearing on her Izuku's face. She gulped. "So this is how I die. I always knew my son's cuteness would be the end of me." She picked up her phone, quickly taking a picture of the sight and sending it to the other parents. They'd all want to remember this, she was sure. "I'll survive dash. Kai, Oka," Izuku murmured in his sleep, and in response the purple-haired girl seemed to nuzzle deeper into him. "Oh." Inko punched in the number of her doctor. "Mrs. Midoriya? Why are you dash? How much will insulin shots cost?" Mina groaned as the light of the sun outside hit her eyes through the window and she began to wake. It was always the worst part of the day, the lethargy even after a good night's rest. She pushed herself up, stretching her small arms and looking around before smiling as she remembered where she was. She saw close by there was Izuku, still sleeping away with a peaceful smile on his face. The rest of the girls were missing however, which prompted her to take a look around, only to spot them all huddled up in the corner. Hurrying over, she was surprised to see them looking over some kind of photo albums. "Hey guys." "Oh, good morning Mina." Momo greeted with a small frown, as she flipped through the pages. "Is something the matter?" the pink-haired girl asked, confused as to the looks of worry on her friends' faces. Kyoka pointed to one of the pictures, and the issue quickly became apparent. Oh, it was a picture of Izuku, playing happily as presumably a toddler. What was really surprising though is that Kacchan character was with him, seeming nowhere near as hostile as he did now. Why are they playing together? Uraraka asked, confused as to why they seemed so much friendlier in these pictures than what they saw now. Katsuki changed. Inko's sudden voice made them all jump, as they turned to see the woman standing there with a sad expression on her face. He's the son of my friend. Katsuki and Izuku, they used to be the best of friends, but when Katsuki got his powers it went to his head, and I'm pretty sure my Izuku paid the price for it. I hate it, but there's nothing I can do about. Nothing I can afford to do. He's quirkless, so no one really cares what I have to say. I can't move him to another school, no one would take him. That's why I'm glad he finally has you girls. She looked to them all with pleading eyes. So please, keep being his friend? I promise. Kyoka spoke up before anyone else, with a fierce determination in her voice. Yeah, me too. We'll make sure he knows what real friends are. Mina followed up, clenching her fists determinedly. The other girls soon followed with their own agreements, and a soft smile came onto the plump woman's face as she seemed to relax a little. Thank you, it means a lot, to both of us. She sighed, before fixing them with a much more motherly gaze. Now, do you all want breakfast? Yes please. They all chorused, the prospect of food quickly enticing them. The mother smiled, turning and walking off to the kitchen. Some of the girls made to move as well, but both Kyoka and Mina quickly held them back with concerned looks. He's hiding stuff. The pink-skinned girl spoke up before anyone eventually, her purple-haired friend quickly nodding along. He had his own best friend turn against him. That's not right. Kyoka sighed, gritting her teeth. He wasn't his best friend, if he was he wouldn't have abandoned him. Uraraka pointed out with an angry huff, getting nods from Azui and Momo. But, he won't tell us, and I don't think he'd like us going behind his back. Hagakure pointed out with a sigh. It was annoying, they didn't want to hurt his feelings or anything, but they did want him to be safe. 2 more chances. Momo suddenly announced, looking at them all. We give him 2 more chances to tell someone if something happens. If he doesn't after that, we talk to our parents, figure out what we can do. They all shared a look, before nodding. 2 more chances. Then they would take matters into their own hands. Thanks for coming. I had so much fun. Izuku called to his friends, as they all were getting ready to get in Momo's parents' limousine and return home. Oh, by the way, Izuku. Mina called, surprising the boy with the use of his first name as she pulled out her phone. She quickly pressed a few buttons and ping got his attention from his own. Checking it, he found he'd been added to a group chat. It's for all of our friends, so you should be there as well. Yeah, you're on of the girls now. Uraraka said, pulling him into a tight hug, making him laugh and blush at the same time. After her came Momo, Mina, Hagakure, Azui, then finally, to everyone's surprise, Kyoka practically jumped him into a tight hug. I thought you didn't like hugging boys. Ribbit. Azui asked confused, and a sheepish grin came onto the purple-haired girl's face. Yeah, but Mina said it herself, he's one of the girls. She smirked, grip remaining tight. And he was. 'Cause to them, it didn't matter if he was a guy. He was one of them, and they'd do everything in their power to protect him. Because they'd always look out for one of their own. Hagakure, hi geese. Anyone free next Sunday? I have something I want to do. Uraraka, sorry. Busy. Mina, I have dance class. Kyoka, sing-in lessons. Azui, hose pedal. Mom is sick. Momo, oh dear, I hope she will be okay. Toru, I'm afraid my new school wants me to take part in a pantomime. I apologize. Hagakure, oh okay, sad face. Oh. I'm free Hagakure. If you want me to cum. Hagakure, yay. Please. Izuku smiled as he and his mother came up to the Hagakure residence. It was a simple house with 2 floors and a pristine garden, all in all the very definition of quaint. Inko reached forward, knocking on the wooden door 3 times and waiting, as her son bounced on the ball of his feet excitedly. It took a couple of moments, but eventually the door pulled open, revealing a floating gray men's suit, Kobo Hagakure. Ah, Miss Midoriya. It's good to see you again. The floating suit greeted jovially upon seeing them, before his gaze, presumably, turned down to the child with her. And good to see you too, young man. Toru has been a ball of energy all day waiting for you. As if summoned by her name, a floating pink dress with matching purple socks appeared, coming to see who was at the door. Daddy, who, Midoriya? The second she spotted her green-haired friend, she bolted past her father and pulled the boy into a tight hug, which he quickly returned with a small blush and happy laugh. I'm so happy you're here, I think he can tell. A feminine voice laughed from behind them all, drawing their attention to behind them all were an invisible woman wearing a pajama top and bottoms, Kata Hagakure. Sorry for the outfit, was cooking and accidentally got myself covered in sauce. Had to hurry to get some clothes. Ah, I've made that mistake quite a few times. Inko laughed with a small smile that was almost as adorable as Izuku's. Both the invisible parents had the same thought on seeing it. It's good to see both of you. So that's where Izuku gets his cuteness from. Toru, Midoriya, why don't you two go play in the living room while we talk? Mr. Hagakure suggested, the two taking his advice and quickly hurrying off to the main room while Izuku waved goodbye to his mother. As they were walking away they overheard one last bit of their conversation. So Izuku will be alright here? He's been to other people's houses before so that shouldn't be an issue. Not to worry Miss Midoriya, I doubt you could. Find a safer place around. We have to be extra careful already with the fact we're invisible dash. They didn't hear any more after that as Toru shut the door behind them, before grabbing Izuku's hand and pulling him towards the television and showing him the game's console underneath. Is this what you wanted to show me? The quirkless boy pondered, excitement glistening in his eyes as the invisible girl put in a new disc and grabbed two controllers. You like video games? Yeah, they're so fun. I got a new game, but I wanted to play it with someone else first. She explained, pulling him towards the couch. You will play with me, right? Of course. The boy smiled bright, jumping up beside her on the same chair with his own controller. To his surprise the invisible girl leaned into him as soon as they were seated, practically resting her head on his shoulder making his face twinge red. So what's it about? Oh. It's a role-playing game? Something like that. She said excitedly, nuzzling more into him as she clicked through menus so fast that Izuku was half convinced she'd already played it before. She picked the option for multiplayer, the screen then suddenly turning into a vertical split screen, duplicated on the top and bottom. Izuku quickly discovered he was to be using the bottom screen which had a light blue border around it while Hagakure's top view instead had a red border. Both had 5 races of characters to choose from come up and Izuku took his time quietly looking through them while Hagakure read them out loud as best she could. What do you think, Izuku? The invisible girl asked, catching the greenette off guard with his first name. What are you gonna be? I think I'll be the Kavit, he decided, picking a race that had distinct similarities to certain canines. Unbeknownst to him, his friend pulled a face as she shifted in his arms. Oh, why? They seem boring, their only power is going invisible. She said with a small huff, making the greenette frown. Why would you want someone who can only do that? Because the invisible person I know in real life is awesome. He quickly explained, hugging her as he worried she wasn't thinking well of herself. Of course I'd want to be like her. You're the one who picked someone with no powers, Hagakure. Yeah, because powerless people are more amazing than people with them. She exclaimed, hugging him back tight. And it's Toru. Oh? Are you sure? I don't want to be rude. He said more quietly with a frown, only for the girl to nuzzle into him again. Yeah. It isn't fair if we all call each other our real names and you don't get to, Izuku. She huffed, making the quirkless boy smile. Thank you. He said, before his gaze shifted back to the TV. I'm still going to be the Kavit. With that, the two turned their attention back to the game that would take up their next few hours with rapt attention. That's a lot of guards. Yeah, but I can get past them easy. That's why invisible people are so awesome. That's going to be you one day when we're all heroes. Huh. Did you see that? I didn't need powers to be strong enough to win the strength competition. I bet you're going to be that strong one day, Izuku. I doubt it. No, really. You're going to be amazing, I just know it. Come out wherever you are. Izuku called with a massive smile on his face as he stalked through the halls of the Hagakure residence, the windows showing the sky outside beginning to darken. They had finally turned the game off when Kata had called on them for dinner, Izuku enjoying the food immensely and being sure to let the woman know as much who seemed more than happy to hear it. It wasn't as good as his own mother's but it was still amazing. Now, the two were engaged in a simple game of hide and seek which is what the invisible girl had wanted to play. Izuku had wanted to play tag and though he'd been willing to just do as she said she'd made them play rock paper scissors to be fair. I'm going to find you. He called again, taking a quick peek into the girl's parents' room through the door. They weren't allowed to go in but he remembered Kacchan used to cheat when they'd still been friends by using things like that to his advantage. Eventually, he came across the girl's room and noticed a pile of pink on the floor, picking it up to reveal a dress. Toru. Using your quirk is cheating. He. He heard a giggling from nearby, spotting a few clothes in her closest moving about ever so slightly. He threw her dress over her with a pout. Ah, you found me. That's not fair. He pointed out, but a part of him was trying to avoid laughing as the girl threw her dress back on happily. I can't use powers in my turns. Oh, I'm sorry Izuku. She said, suddenly her voice sounding guilty as she hurried over and pulled him into a hug. I didn't think of that, I promise I won't do it again. Thank you. He sighed, sitting on her bed after a moment. He frowned, looking down. Is something the matter? I'm just wondering if Azui's mom is all right. He explained, looking down. She said they were at the hospital so. Maybe we should text her then. The invisible girl decided, pulling out her phone. Izuku waited patiently but before she could even begin typing out a message, she let out an excited shout. Oh my god. Izuku, look. The brunette raised a brow as the phone was shoved into his hand, until he saw the conversation and his own eyes widened. Best friends. Tsuyu, Jai's. Mom is pregnant. Kyoka, huh? Mina, yay. Achiko, what's pregnant? Momo, prgnnt. And it means Tsu is going to have a sister or a brother. Achiko, that's great. You, Izuku here. We are both happy for you. He looked up, sharing a grin with his friend. Well, he assumed she was also grinning. That's better than I thought it would be. He laughed, tilting his head to the side. I feel better now. Great, she said, clapping her hands together before she let out a more mischievous laugh as she suddenly pressed her hand against the brunette's chest. Then we can play again. Tag. With that, she rocketed off. Izuku left confused for a moment before his brain caught up and he took off after her. Hey! It was your turn, not mine. He laughed regardless though, chasing her down the stairs and almost tripping on the slippery tiling of the kitchen as he continued to go after her. It was in the garden he finally got her, cutting her off at the tree and getting her arm. Tag, you're it. Hey! She shouted as the boy turned, bolting for the house with a cackle. Get back here, Izuku! They continued on like that for another hour, managing to catch each other every couple of minutes, the longest amount of time either of them being it, when Izuku took 10 minutes finding the invisible girl to tag her in her room. It just so happened that was the last tag of the game as well as exhaustion caught up with them at that point, the two deciding to sit on the girl's bed and catch their breath. Toru had wrapped her arms around him after a moment, which he'd returned quietly, not quite sure why she was hugging him. He never got a reason either as after a couple of moments, both of them passed out and entered into the realm of sleep. Zuku? Izuku? Inko's voice rang out in the brunette's ear, as he slowly began to open his eyes and look around to see his mother and Toru's parents looking at them. Of course, he could only see his mother's facial expression as she looked upon the scene before her with a look of joy. Izuku's arms were wrapped tight around Toru's neck and it was clear from what could be seen of her dress that she was clinging tight to his waist, nuzzling into him in her sleep. Hi sweetie. Inko greeted, smiling. It's time to go home, now. It's almost bedtime. Ah. He whined, but he began to get up. As he did, he felt his friend cling to him tighter as if trying to prevent him from leaving. The adults in the room felt their hearts tighten at the sight. Come on, Toru. Kata cooed, prying her daughter off the brunette carefully. Mom, Izuku has to go now, okay? The woman explained and the girl let out a light whine more like a puppy than a human. Oh, okay. She sighed, sounding sad before she pushed herself up and hugged Izuku again. Bye Toru. Bye Izuku, I hope you get home safe. Izuku smiled at that, ready to pull away. Before he could though, the girl seemed to have decided she wasn't done being adorable, as she pulled his head towards her. Mwah! And kissed him right on the cheek, making him blush bright. The rest of the adults could only clutch their chests at the adorable moment between their children. Thank you. Bye. With that, the boy finally reluctantly left with his mother and the invisible family waved them off, the youngest of them with a sad smile. She definitely had to have him over again sometime soon. It had been 5 months since Izuku had been rescued by the girls way back in April from Bakugo and his cronies and he was now playing in a similar park with two of those girls, Achiko and Tsuyu, playing a round of the boop game Momo had come up with. Without Mina and Momo present to dominate the game, it was becoming apparent that of the current trio Achiko was the surprising champion of the game, laughing joyfully every time she managed to boop one of her friends. They had wanted to do a group meet-up again but sadly most had been otherwise occupied or simply unable to make the trip, a sad byproduct of how far apart they all lived. Still, Tsuyu's parents had been insistent on her enjoying the end of the summer while she still could before winter came around and the cold became an issue for her. Fortunately, at least Izuku and Achiko had been free so they'd promised they'd spend time with her, which she was thankful for. At the moment, she was sitting out the boop game as Izuku ran after their brunette friend as the current chaser, the frog girl having been eliminated first. She just smiled softly to herself, hearing the sound of her friends laughing making her feel light and happy inside. It took a couple of minutes but eventually Ochako ran out of breath, giving her freckle-faced pursuer enough time to grab her, finger landing right on her nose. Boop! He shouted, making the gravity girl laugh as they walked over to Tsuyu, starting to feel a little tired from the constant running about. Not that I don't like the boop game, but we need more stuff to do. Ochako hummed, plopping down on the grass beside her frog friend while Izuku continued looking around the park. We need to train in other ways for being heroes. Plus doing the same thing every time is kinda boring. Yeah. Oh. Izuku's eyes lit up as he spotted a tree and he smiled. How about this, we can try and see if we can all climb that tree over there. Huh? Both girls' eyes turned to the large tree, with what looked almost like an entire city's worth of branches coming off of it. The brunette's eyes glistened as she grinned, pumping her fist into the air in excitement. Oh, you are so on Izuku. Tsuyu just laughed to herself internally, before running ahead of them both, dropping down onto all fours before leaping up, easily grabbing onto one of the thicker branches and perching atop it. Yututha's turn, she said with a giggle, kicking her legs back and forth. She watched Ochako try, and fail, to jump up the tree a few times, before huffing and looking around for something she could use as leverage. As she did, Izuku grinned wide, gesturing for Tsuyu to budge over first. As soon as she did, both girls watched him bolt at the tree, jumping and planting a foot on the side and just barely managing to leap off again, grabbing the branch and clambering up, before letting out a delighted giggle. Yes. I did it. Izuku. That was amazing. Ribbit. The frog girl said excitedly, throwing her arms around his neck once he finally was secure on the branch, while their gravity-defying friend below clapped before once again going back to look for a way to make her own ascent. While Ochako was busy with that however, Tsuyu's spirits fell as Izuku's face flushed red and he went quiet, very barely hugging the girl back. She pulled away with a sad frown, meeting his gaze. He always acted differently around her than the other girls and she wasn't sure why. Still, she was worried she had an idea and now she had a chance to ask him alone. Do you not like me, Izuku? The green-haired girl asked, making the freckle-faced child's emerald orbs go wide in shock and sadness. What? Of course I like you. You're one of my best friends, he said vehemently, blushing lightly as he pulled her right back into another hug. Why would you think I don't like you? Because you don't act the same with me. She ribbited sadly, gently holding him back as she blinked, looking down with sad eyes. Why you're always more quiet, or hiding from me? You are always staring at me weirdly as well. Tsu. He let out a sad sigh, then he did something that surprised them both. Moi. He kissed her right on the cheek. The frog girl froze in surprise while the boy pulled away, face scarlet but a soft smile on his face. Titsu. I act weird because I like you. I don't know why but, you just make me really happy to be around. He explained simply, making the frog girl feel warm inside. It feels different but still good. You make me feel weird but I like it. Ribbit. I am sorry I made why you think I don't like you. He stuttered, barely able to compose himself after having just kissed a girl. I really do. I promise I'll try to be more normal from now on. Moi. He was cut off suddenly by a kiss to the forehead, completely blindsiding him and making his eyes go wide. I like why you too. She said simply, pulling him into the hug one last time. We should try and figure out why it's different though. Why yeah. Izuku said, smiling softly as he held her. Whether they figured it out, he was content to just have the girl with him for now. However, they weren't alone up there for long. Ochako eventually managed to join them by barely floating a log up high enough and jumping onto the branch. They all shared a few laughs after that, eventually hopping down one by one. Izuku was the last to jump and his landing was less than graceful, tripping over his feet and face planting, shirt lifting in the process. Izuku, are you okay? Ochako asked worriedly, hurrying to his side and helping him up. Tsuyu meanwhile simply stared with sad eyes, having seen his back. Why yeah. He coughed, groaning and pushing himself up. You have new burns. Ribbit. Tsuyu said with a sad voice, surprising both Izuku and Ochako, the latter of whose eyes widened in shock. On your back. Izuku? Is that true? The brunette beside him asked, her own eyes dimming slightly. It's nothing, he tried to defend, putting his hands up. It was just . It wath Bakugu, wasn't it? Tsuyu asked simply. After a moment, Izuku sighed and nodded. I really don't like him. Me neither. Ochako agreed, making Izuku frown before suddenly both girls hugged him. You don't deserve to be hurt by him. I am getting used to it. He said sadly, making their hearts break as they held him tighter. See, can we just play now? I don't want to think about it. Okay, Achiko sighed, letting go of him. Both girls shared a look however, similar thoughts running through their heads. Strike one. After they moved on from that topic, they decided to just play a few rounds of heroes versus villains, taking turns switching between who was who. And for once, Izuku never froze around Tsuyu again, all three eventually having to leave the park. But when they left, they had the biggest smiles on their faces. Izuku's helpers. Achiko, strike one. Mina, oh no. Momo, I was hoping this would not occur. Tsuyu, he had burns on his back. Toru, sad face. Kyoka, I hope he is okay. Oh, what about this one? Mina asked excitedly, pointing to an arcade machine in front of her that was titled Why Men Battlers. I bet you'll enjoy this one, Izuku. It's got superheroes. Oh? Let's play that first then. Izuku smiled excitedly, following his pink-skinned friend while she tugged him along by the wrist. Momo wasn't too far behind, as she was following them with a soft smile. Thank you for inviting me and Izuku to join you on this day out, Mr. and Mrs. Ishido. She said politely to her friend's parents, who just smiled at her. She'd been quite excited when Mina and Izuku had come up to her, asking if she wanted to join them on a visit to the local arcade. It was a nice way to celebrate the 8-month anniversary of having met Izuku, even if none of them realized it at the time. Sadly, the other girls had all been busy, so it was just Mina, Momo, and Izuku. Ah, no problem, kiddo. Mina's dad said with a grin. He took out a bag of tokens and handed it to her, before pointing to a nearby section filled with seats and tables, and further in the back it had a kitchen. Me and Mio will be sitting at the cafe if you need us. We know you're responsible, so keep an eye on our daughter, alright? She's a troublemaker and will most definitely try to get Midoriya involved if she can. Don't forget to have fun yourself, though. I won't, thank you. You didn't need to buy the tokens though, I would have been glad to use my allowance. The raven-haired girl said, frowning slightly. For a 4-year-old, she looked and acted more like a 6 or 7-year-old to most people, and she was aware the Ishidos didn't have the same amount of money as her family. However, the two pink-skinned parents just laughed at her offer. It's sweet of you to offer, Yayorozu, but we want to be the ones paying for you kids to have fun. It's our job. Mina's mother chortled, before pointing to Izuku and Mina, who were both sitting on seats they'd nearly fell over climbing up on, now battling each other in the game. Mina was winning but only barely. Now go have fun, dearie. That's what you're here for. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Momo bowed, before turning and making her way over to her friends. She smiled as she approached them, hearing the end of their current conversation, Mina knocking Izuku's character out. Whoa, Mina. You're amazing. Their freckle-faced friend gushed, eyes glistening as he looked over to her with a bright smile. You must have a lot of practice at these games. Hey, you're no slouch yourself, Izuku. I've never been that close to losing to anyone before. The pink-skinned child grinned proudly, before a more mischievous look came onto her face as she bent her legs, her chair starting to tilt. Momo's eyes went wide. So a reward hug is in order, catch me, Izuku. Ah, Mina. The raven-haired kid called in a worried voice, using a leg to stop the girl's chair from falling before then having to rush and grab her two falling curly-haired friends, barely grabbing them and stopping them from colliding with the ground. They were heavy as well, winding her as she set them down. Fortunately, she was used to helping carry some decently heavy stuff during the training her parents insisted on if she was to be a pro hero in future. Mina. That was incredibly reckless. You could have hurt yourself and Izuku. She scolded with a glare as the pink girl held on tight to Izuku, whose eyes were wide as he took a few deep breaths to calm himself after the fall. Sorry, Momo. I was just excited, the fluffy-haired girl pouted as she still held on to Izuku. You too, Zu. It's fine. Izuku said breathlessly, helping her to her feet. We're both fine, right? Barely. The tallest of the trio muttered under her breath. If you're done nearly injuring yourself, do you want to play a different game now? I have the tokens. Oh. Yeah. Mina said, eyes glistening with excitement, before turning to the boy beside her. Izuku, what do you want to play? I choose the game so you choose one now. Oh, he looked around, looking at each machine curiously before his eyes lit up at one ahead of him, running forward. It was a row of skee-ball machines. Oh. Let's see who can get a higher score on these. Yeah. Mina cheered excitedly, hurrying to his side. Momo just sighed at them, both completely forgetting how close they'd been to injury, watching as they took places at their machines and waited patiently. Winner gets a kiss on the cheek. Yeah, wait, what? The green-haired teen blinked, his pink-skinned friend giggling while Momo gave them both tokens. I said the winner gets a kiss. The girl repeated happily. Oh, okay, he said, blushing lightly but still smiling, taking the ball the machine just spat out to him. While both the curly-haired children did that, their raven-haired friend just watched from the back, a smile on her face seeing them both have so much fun. They spent a good 2 minutes at this, both throwing the ball as best they could, usually only reaching the lower scores due to their small arms. When they did eventually finish up, there was only a 5-point difference between them, the machine spitting out their tickets. Izuku had been the one to pull out in the lead as well, so Mina had kept her promise, wrapping her arms around the boy and pecking him on the cheek happily, giggling when he turned bright red. "You look so cute like this." She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder briefly as she looked around. "Let's find another game now, come on." They continued on like that for the next 15 minutes, flitting about different games, mainly arcade machines. Some were multiplayer games where Izuku and Mina would have to cooperate or fight each other. Whenever games of the latter came up, Mina would almost always win but usually had to put up a fight against her green-haired companion. However, the horned child didn't fail to notice Momo never took part, simply watching from behind as if she wasn't allowed to play or something, which she decided to address. "Hey Momo? Why aren't you playing with us?" Huh? "Oh, well I'm rather content to watch you both be happy. I do need to look out for you both after all. Don't worry about me." She waved away the issue as if it was nothing, only for Izuku to suddenly grab her hand, surprising her. "You should get to play as well. Please? I bet we can find a game you'll like." She could only blink at his puppy dog eyes before her face heated up slightly, unable to resist his pleas. "Well, if you are certain you want me to join." "Oh, I know the perfect game," Mina suddenly announced, pointing to a nearby section where there were bigger games kept inside a square section, separated from the rest by a wall of glass. "There is a racing game that lets up to 4 people play. Let's go on that." Momo is tall enough for the Moda, the vroom vroom bike. "Motorcycle, Mina. You're looking for the word motorcycle." The raven-haired girl among them giggled, while the golden-eyed girl pouted lightly, leading the way. "I suppose it can't hurt to join this once." With that, they wandered inside and made their way to the aforementioned racing game. It had 4 vehicles with which the players were meant to use to play the game. Mina and Izuku, due to their size, were required to take the 2 cars the game had ready for their own safety, while Momo thanks to her height was able to safely mount one of the 2 motorcycles. They all inserted their tokens, the game starting up. Momo chose to simply play as the first racer that came up on her screen, while Mina and Izuku took a few moments picking theirs. Both picked women as their avatars, Mina likely because of her racer's stats while Izuku chose his due to the passing resemblance it had to Momo. The game started up and as soon as the announcer said go, Momo's biker shot off ahead of her friends, the girl in real life giggling as she leaned to the side coming up to a corner. As they got further into those games, those small giggles became full-blown joyful laughs as she practically sparkled, having fun as she leaned left and right, gripping the handlebars tight. Izuku and Mina just shared delighted smiles at seeing their taller friend so happy, both sharing a thought about how pretty the raven-haired girl looked on the bike, with her wide smile. Still, the tallest of the trio didn't remain in the lead forever, eventually being overtaken by Izuku whose stats were simply better, grinning wide himself as he came up on the finish line for the final lap, yanking the steering wheel to the side for the final turn. Only for sudden pain to flare up in his arm and him to let out a small cry, letting go of the steering wheel and the accelerator, letting his car crash as Momo shot past him into first place, before Mina took second place a moment later, the boy coming in third just before one of the game's AIs. However, instead of celebrating their victories, Momo and Mina quickly hurried over to his side, helping him out his seat and fussing over him. "Izuku, are you alright?" Momo asked concerned, gently massaging his hand where she assumed the pain was and looking it over. "I'm fine, my hand just cramped." He lied, trying to smile. He didn't want her to see his shoulder where the real injury was. There was no point in worrying his friends. "Izuku," Mina said quietly, before hugging him tight. She didn't believe him, but she wasn't sure how to check her theory yet, so she went along with his claims. "Did you write too much in your notebook again or something? You know holding your hand like that for too long will make it hurt." "Alright," he nodded, rubbing the back of his head. "But I'm fine now, totally fine. So let's go play some other games, I just want to have fun with my best friends." Both Momo and Mina blinked at that before pulling him into a group hug with smiles. Then the pink-skinned girl noticed a claw machine in the background, her eyes lighting up as she spotted one of the plush toys inside, one resembling All Might. "Alright. If you want to do something else, then I see something we can try," she said excitedly, breaking the hug and making her way over. "Let's try and win that All Might plush." Alright." Izuku giggled, being tugged along by his wrist once again, not that he minded. It wasn't quite the same as holding her hand but he still enjoyed it. You two have fun with that, I'm just going to ask your parents if we can get some cold drinks, Mina. Momo called, making her way back towards the cafe. Hopefully the coldness will help stop his hands cramping up. It didn't take her long at all to get those drinks as there wasn't a long line or anything, she was only gone for 5 minutes at the most. And yet somehow, by the time Momo returned to her friends, Mina was giggling nervously while kneeling on the floor and Izuku, he was stuck halfway inside the claw machine, his legs kicking around as he tried to push his way out. Mina, what did you do? The creation girl sighed, giving the pink girl their drinks while her hand began glowing pink, a bottle forming in her hands. It was one of the very first things her parents had shown her how to make, lubricant, as her mother had a habit of getting stuck places due to her fuller figure and would need help getting out. Izuku, this is going to be cold but I promise it will be over in a minute, it will help you get out. Oh okay, his voice echoed inside the machine as she rubbed the cool liquid into her hands before reaching down and taking hold of Izuku's waist, the boy shuddering as her hands ran over his sides. See cold? We did win the game. Mina began explaining, rubbing the back of her head nervously. But the stupid plush got stuck in the hole, so I told Izuku to climb in and grab it. I thought he was small enough to get it easily. You couldn't just wait for me to come back and grab it? My arms would have been long enough most likely. Momo pointed out exasperated as she began pulling gently, Izuku slowly slipping out of the machine. As soon as he was out, he took her into a thank you hug which she returned. I was kinda impatient. Mina giggled nervously. I'm starting to see why your parents needed someone to keep an eye on you. Hey, the pink-skinned girl pouted, before her eyes lit up as she spotted something behind the taller girl and a mischievous smile came onto her face. Oh hey, let's try and sneak in there. Both Momo and Izuku looked back confused, before spotting a section that was being guarded by a member of staff. Looking at the sign at the side, Momo quickly understood why. No one under 16 beyond this point, mature section ahead. Warning, gorier games ahead. No, Momo said simply, turning to her friend. I'm sorry Mina but I'm putting my foot down this time. Ah, Momo, the horned girl pouted, getting a light tap on her nose from the creation girl. No buts. You're going to end up scarring Izuku and yourself. I'm just trying to keep you out of trouble. She explained simply and Mina sighed, suddenly hugging her while Izuku looked on in confusion. I know you are, that's what's annoying. She sighed. Fine, let's find something else to— oh. Hey guys, look. They have a dancing game. With that sudden exclamation the acid girl ran off ahead, Momo and Izuku sharing fond looks as they rolled their eyes and followed her. Izuku, dance with me. Mina called with a happy smile, pointing out the second dance mat. Huh? Are you sure? Maybe Momo would dash. Please. The pink girl pouted, using her own puppy dog eyes and they were incredibly effective at making both Izuku and Momo's hearts clench from how adorable she looked. Those eyes of hers were a weapon. Alright then, Izuku nodded quietly, making his way to the machine while Momo once again watched from the sidelines. It didn't take the tallest of the three long to figure out why Mina was insistent on Izuku dancing, as she watched his movements and noticed how his left arm was much more stiff than his right at the moment. Judging by how Mina was more focused on keeping an eye on Izuku than actually dancing as well, it became apparent it wasn't a coincidence but an actual plan from the acid girl, to see if his hand cramp had really been what he had claimed it was. Mina didn't let the game finish, stopping her dancing and immediately making her way over to the honorary girl as she and the other girls had taken to calling him, taking him off to the side. Mina? Momo. He let out a sudden yelp as Mina, without warning, pressed her fingers into his shoulder. See careful. Your hand isn't what hurt earlier, is it? Momo asked simply, making him flush as he looked down. Izuku, what happened to your shoulder? Please, we just want to help you be alright? Yeah, we don't like seeing you hurt. Mina said with a sad frown, taking him into another hug. That's why I didn't want to tell you. It's not a big deal, he said quietly, however upon seeing the looks he got he sighed. Kacchan was mad because he saw us at the park the other day. He just doesn't like the fact we're friends. I feel guilty dash. Forget him. He's a meanie. Mina said, somewhat angrily as her hug tightened. And you shouldn't be hurt because of him. Thank you. Was all Izuku said, hugging her back as Momo's own arms also wrapped around him and Mina, holding the two protectively. What the green-haired boy didn't know is that mentally, Mina and Momo were thinking the same thing. There goes strike two. They stayed like that for a few minutes, before deciding to go play a few more games together that wouldn't agitate Izuku's shoulder. Eventually, they had a fair few tickets they'd won, taking them to the counter with Ishido's parents. They had decided amongst themselves what to put their tickets to, and in the end they had spotted a packet of rings, 6 to be precise, that Izuku had said they should buy. Once they had them, he'd asked Momo to make some string, which she'd fortunately been able to, and tied them together. The rings had 2 of each color, those colors being green, pink and red. Once he was done, he'd put on the necklace that had a red and pink ring, before giving Mina one with a green and red ring and Momo one with a pink and green ring. The colors are like us, so I just thought, we wouldn't be able to wear them cause they're too big, but we could wear them like necklaces? Like friendship necklaces. Both the girls had blinked at that before hugging him and sharing their enthusiasm with excited smiles, Mina chirping in her opinion. More like best friend necklaces. Yeah, that sounded nice. Oh, they have other colors. Momo pointed out. We should come back with some of the other girls in future and try and make a whole set for each of us. That's an awesome idea, Momo. And that was how, from that moment on, Izuku forever had a new essential accessory for every one of his outfits. Izuku's helpers. Momo, I am sad to say, strike 2. Mina, Izuku's shoulder was hurt in. Achiko, Bakugo? Mina, yeah. Kyoka, stupid jerk. All 6 of Izuku's friends sighed after the message was left that the second and final strike was gone. They knew what it meant. It was time they did something about Izuku's bullies. Within the confines of Mina's home, 6 little girls dressed in pajamas sat in a circle around their friend's bed, having a serious discussion with as much gravity as a bunch of 5-year-olds could manage to bring to a subject. Which to an outsider's perspective probably wasn't much, but nevertheless, it was a serious issue they were faced with as they discussed their 7th, absent friend. This feels weird without Izuku. Mina complained as she hugged her little alien plushie to her tiny chest, pouting as she looked around. It's not a proper group sleepover if he isn't here. I wholeheartedly agree. Momo nodded, ever the elegant and proper girl despite her age. It just doesn't feel as though we're complete without him. Ribbit. Yeah. With he was here. But we couldn't talk about how to deal with that JRK Bakugo if he was here. Tsuyu pointed out, getting Achiko to nod rapidly beside her, the brunette always seeming to gain far too much energy at sleepovers. You know how secretive he gets when we talk about that bully, she said with a small, angry, yet adorable, pout of her own. Secretive. Momo quickly corrected, before the raven-haired child then cleared her throat and got everyone's attention. I think the sensible way to continue would be to go to our parents. Oh, good idea. My mom always knows what to do whenever I bring her maths thingies. Hagakure said, clapping her hands. I love watching her write, she's so smart. And my dad is super strong, he can lift anything. He could lift those bullies right into space, definitely. Achiko joined in with Hagakure as the 2 girls gushed about how cool their parents were, the others speaking up similar sentiments a few moments later about their own progenitors. Yes, we all have wonderful parents. Still, I'm sure some of them might not know what to do, but if we all go to all our parents, and talk to them, we can find a way to deal with this. Momo said, looking around them all with a smile. Are we all agreed? Yeah. Definitely. Great, then I believe it's about time we should consider sleeping. Momo gave them all her best kind, protective smile that made them all feel safe when they saw it. Ah, but I've still got so much energy. Achiko whines as the others giggled, Mina hugging her brunette friend. Bet you'll fall asleep before anyone else, Oka. The pink-skinned girl giggled, ignoring her friend sticking her tongue out at her. I think I have the sleeping bags in my closet. Ah, Kyoka whined quietly to herself, getting all eyes to turn to her. She went red and didn't meet their eyes. Something the matter, Kyo? Hagakure asked, making the purple-haired girl look up nervously. Kay kinda wanted to do the H-hug pile again. The girl admitted shyly, making Mina smile brightly. Oh, me too. That was fun. She cheered, before suddenly being pulled into a hug by both Achiko and Hagakure. Yay! Then let's go already. Hagakure called, Tsuyu rib-biting nearby happily as she joined, Momo coming around the back and Kyoka moving to near the middle of the pile. Achiko was the first to fall asleep just as Mina predicted, followed by the pink-skinned girl, then Momo, followed by Kyoka and Hagakure. Tsuyu was the last to fall asleep, burying herself into Achiko's side. She let out a small but happy ribbit at seeing they'd still left a spot open for Izuku despite him not being there. As expected, not all the parents were quite as equipped as the others to handle the sudden rush of their daughters begging them to help their friend. The Urarakas were surprised and unable to think much of what they could do, beyond offering Izuku a safe place to stay if he ever needed it, which didn't particularly help as much as they'd like. The Gyrus equally were pretty uncertain on how to proceed, though they did take this fairly seriously, hating the idea that one of their daughter's friends that had been bringing their little angel so much joy was being hurt, starting a social media campaign of their own. They could take pride in raising money for anti-bullying ventures and quirkless awareness charities, yet none of it hit the root cause like they wanted. It was with the Azuis things started to become more serious. While Baru was mostly out of commission, looking after her newborn bundle of joy Samidare and not being able to provide much assistance beyond moral support, Ganma Azui had been quick to the phone, making a few calls to his office, a law firm that he owned. Things only continued to pick up from there, as Mr. Hagakure himself was also a lawyer in the public sector, one of the most highly rated ones for that matter, who took great offense to the idea of his daughter's friend being discriminated against for quirk discrimination, especially when it was someone as sweet as Izuku. Even Mio Ashido, Mina's mother, was set off at the revelation her daughter brought before her. The only time Mina remembered her mother looking so scary was in the videotapes of her fighting for UFC championships. She watched her put on her police uniform she wore for her job, and storm off. When Mina asked where she was going she'd gotten a simple answer. To talk with the station about arrest warrants and discrimination laws. As if a potential public denouncing of the school from the relatively popular Gyrus, an angry former UFC championship police detective and threat of legal action from two mutant lawyers who hated quirk discrimination wasn't enough, finally Momo approached her own parents. The Yairuzes, who had held many of the group's events, especially when it had all 7 of them together, who probably had seen Izuku the most out of all the parents, barring his own mother. The pure shock, followed by anger on Mr. Yairuzu's face, would be sure to scare anyone as he had walked to the phone, typing in a number and waiting with bated breath for someone to pick up. Momo didn't hear much, but she could infer he was talking to the other parents, setting something up. Then finally he turned his attention to his daughter. "What's the name of Midoriya's school, sweetie?" "Aldera Elementary, father." "Why?" Momo asked, curious. "Because I need to know the name to buy it out." As if the others weren't bad enough, they'd made enemies of one of the richest and most influential families in Japan. It was a week after the sleepover Momo found herself in her room, with Izuku curled up in her side. Over the course of the year they had known each other, she had discovered a shared love of reading with her friend. He had a slightly lower reading level than her, struggling with a few words, but overall he was still able to keep up with her more advanced books. The two were midway through an action-adventure novel, Alex Rider, Stormbreaker, by a pre-quirk author, and they were loving every moment of it. They were also loving every moment just spent together. Momo's arm wrapped around Izuku's neck as he buried himself into her side, eyes scanning the page with her as she read out loud as it was her turn to. Izuku had a massive smile on his face, loving how into it his friend got and being enraptured in the spy thriller as he imagined it all from the safety of Momo's arms. It was only a few more minutes before they finished the chapter, Izuku giggling as he nuzzled into her a little before pushing himself up. "You're so cool, Momo." Huh? The girl spluttered in surprise at the sudden declaration, the boy smiling at her widely. "Yeah. You can read so much and read such complicated words. Plus you've got a super strong cool quirk and make us feel safe and you're always looking out for us." Momo felt her face go pure red at the very sudden barrage of compliments. "You're amazing, Momo." Thank you. It means a lot to me," she said, smiling wide at him after a moment and pulling him into a hug. "I think you're pretty amazing as well, Izuku." "You do?" Izuku asked, sounding genuinely confused. You're really smart yourself and you're super creative. I may be able to figure quirks out, but you have such unique and amazing ideas for them I'd never think of. Plus you're really resilient and always impressing me and the rest of the girls. You're even getting pretty fast. You're amazing yourself, Izuku." He blinked in surprise, before smiling widely, the sun itself feeling as though it was smiling on her as he suddenly held her tighter. "Thank you. Thank you so much. It's just the truth," she giggled, rubbing his back slightly. Before they could continue with any more of the compliments, however. "Momo. Midoriya. Your friends are here." The sound of Mrs. Yairuzu shouting up the stairs got their attention and they pulled apart, smiling at each other before they set off, Izuku leading the way quickly. Momo giggled as she had to quicken her pace to keep up, smiling as she watched Izuku laughing to himself and hurrying along. She couldn't help but smile as she began to observe him more closely, comparing this Izuku to the one they'd all met almost a year ago now. He had changed, in subtle ways and one not so subtle way. The not so subtle one being his hair, which he seemed to have been growing out. She'd only noticed it recently, but already messy, unruly hair was beginning to gain length, having managed to go from being roughly cheek length to down to above his shoulders, now medium length instead of short. It made him fit in quite nicely with the rest of the girls' hairstyles, Tsuyu and Momo being the only outliers with their long hair. She also had to admit the longer hair looked really nice on her friend, adding to his inherent cuteness quite well. There were also more subtle variations in this Izuku, however, compared to the one she first met, such as the slowly fading stutter, the slowly developing confidence to speak his mind, and even the way he carried himself. Yet again, this was something she was certain the she and the girls influenced, as his once shy, timid, almost scared steps had now changed to more excited, curious bounds and sways, confidence shining in how he now carried himself. Yet also, every little bob, every little sway, it was like he was trying to imitate his friends, and it led to his way of carrying himself being almost feminine. She supposed she shouldn't be that surprised. He spent almost all his positive time hanging out with girls, it was bound to happen. With all the confidence in every step, it was hardly like she was complaining, and she couldn't help but giggle to herself as she remembered what they'd told him after their first sleepover. One of the girls was perfectly accurate. Momo. Izuku. Mina called out happily at seeing their friends, the group of children meeting up in the center, hugs, and in a certain invisible girl's case, some kisses on the cheek, being exchanged. "All right, kids. Have fun with whatever you want to do." Mr. Yaoruzu spoke up, drawing their attention as the parents all walked towards him. Izuku looked slightly confused, not used to seeing them all together, but the girls all knew what this was about, making them frown very briefly before Kyoka grabbed Izuku's wrist. "Come on. Let's go explore," she said, pulling him along, the other girls rushing to catch up with her as she pulled the green-haired boy along. "Be safe. We'll all be in the study if you need us," Mrs. Yaoruzu called out as the kids all took off down a random hallway, Mina going off on some sudden tirade about the idea of hidden treasure in the mansion the rest of the kids' bar Momo instantly took to, searching around. While they were distracted, the parents all disappeared inside the study, closing the door behind them. Everyone else sat down, Mr. Yaoruzu being the last to come around, addressing them all. "Well, I'm sure most of you are aware of what this is about, barring Inko here." "Yes, I'm quite confused. You told me this was to do with Izuku, but you never elaborated more than that." Inko nodded, looking to him confused. "It was quite concerning." "Yes, well, you see, all our daughters approached each of us. The man began before Kyotoku Jairu, Kyoka's father, took over next. Our little Jairu told us something so not rocking about your kid's school." Mio frowned with an angry glare at the floor. "Inko, your kid's being bullied, and not just in the usual kid way. I'm guessing by your shocked look you don't know, but the kids had burns." "No," Inko muttered, horror settling on her features as she put a hand to her mouth. "I'm afraid that's what Achiko told us as well." The blonde man that was Achiko's father informed the woman. "It's truly horrible," Ribbit. Ganma said, shaking his head with a sigh. "It would also appear, if our daughters are correct, your son's school is helping the bullies instead of him. Which is incredibly illegal." Hagakure finished up, letting the shocked shouts of the unaware parents die down before continuing. "Ganma and I spent a phone call going over this just to be sure, though we were already certain even before then. The lack of interference by the school is highly illegal and could be grounds for at best for them a hefty lawsuit, at worst, a total review and rehiring of the school staff. And while not to quite as severe a degree, the actions taken against Izuku by his bullies are also grounds for serious punishment if it continues, for the parents as well as the kid." Inko gulped, looking up. "So, thank you for telling me this, but what do I do? I don't have the money to dash." "Let me stop you there." Mr. Yaoruzu spoke up with a chuckle despite the situation. "I know it's been a while for you, Inko, since you had Izuku, but we are your friends and quite a few of us quite like your son as well." "I certainly do. We're hardly going to let something this serious keep going on, especially against our daughter's friend." "Yes, I'd gladly take the case for you for free." Ganma nodded. "Quirk and quirkless discrimination may not be the exact same thing, but I still abhor both, and have a policy about cases such as those. Even if it were some random people I never met before, I would still take it for free. And I could pull a few favors to end up defending the school with a not-so-amazing defense if need be," Mr. Hagakure admitted. "I don't mind taking a loss to ensure this is properly dealt with. It wouldn't be the first time I have done it." "Is that ethical?" Mio asked, with a tilt of her head. "An investigation led me to the undeniable conclusion my client was guilty of crimes to make even the most seasoned people feel sick to the core, yet they had the perfect escape. I had a perfect defense to get them a not guilty verdict. I put my morals first and I will happily do it again." "Fair enough. Anyways, I can have a warrant like dash," Mio snapped her fingers, "that, to go and confront the principal of the school to give him a piece of our minds and a chance to change. If he doesn't, failure to comply could get him an early arrest warrant." Inko looked around all the parents, shocked they were all so willing to help her and her son, and then the tears started. She'd apologize for flooding the Yairuzu mansion later when she was less emotional. When she did calm down, she did look around and Mio gave her a smile. So, it's your choice, Inko. How do you want to handle this? I'm scared to find out, but I want to hope that there is some misunderstanding, that the school has good people. Inko said with a frown, looking down. I want to confront them first to get answers. If they're really that bad, then I want to deal with them properly. She really hoped they wouldn't be that bad. Unfortunately, her hopes were in vain. In another room, somehow, to events lost to even the kids' involved memories, Kyoka and Izuku had ended up tied up together on the floor, being guarded by Azui, who had located a pirate's outfit who along with Momo was fending off Achiko and Mina from the treasure. When they inevitably accidentally broke something swinging their fake swords about, they all collectively agreed Mina was at fault. The pink-skinned girl just pouted, but ended up getting hugs as recompense. One more week later and it was finally time for Inko, Mio, Ganma, Mr. Hagakure and Mr. Yairuzu to gather. To onlookers, with how they were dressed and how they carried themselves, one would think they were just a group of friends getting together for a day out. However, when they entered the school, that vibe around them quickly changed as they made their way towards the principal's office, and it became apparent they were a group on a mission. They soon arrived, all sharing looks before nodding and looking to Inko, who took a calming breath, preparing herself for this before she knocked on the door with urgency. Come in? A voice called out and Inko opened the door, walking in to find the principal, a brown-haired short man with red eyes, sat at his desk, reading a file. His eyes seemed to briefly flash with contempt if she wasn't seeing things as she walked in. Miss Midoriya. I wasn't aware we had an appointment to meet. We don't. This is something that couldn't wait to be dealt with after I found out. Inko said simply, getting a raised brow from the man. And whatever could that be? My son is being horrendously bullied while at this school, and based on how long it's been going on, you were aware of it but did nothing. Miss Midoriya, that is a completely baseless allegation. The man tooted, shaking his head. I assure you your son, should any injury have come to him, he didn't sustain it within these walls. Really, you're certain of that? Absolutely. The principal lied through his teeth with a smile. So you'd even be willing to say it under oath? Yes, wait, what? He asked, confusion suddenly lining his features. Then Mio walked in, dressed in her usual work outfit she wore as a detective, her badge being held out prominently so the man would know who she was. His face fell slightly. Then Ganma and Hagakure walked in next, making his eyes go wide. Inko noticed he began to look a little more bothered, starting to sweat as he seemed to recognize the lawyers. Then the killing blow came in, Mr. Yairuzu walking in and causing the principal to jump to his feet in surprise before bowing. Mr. Yao dash. Save it. The man cut off harshly. Just answer Inko's question. Oath? The brunette asked with a hint of dread in his voice. Mio spoke up with far too amused a smirk. Yes, oath. See, right now in my pocket is a warrant to search for evidence should I need it. Mio began explaining, pacing around. We don't have an arrest warrant yet, but if we find anything incriminating that can quickly change. The basis of said search is related to quirk and quirkless discrimination. So if we find any sign that it's happening, this school could be in serious trouble, especially if it comes to light you were aware of it happening and did nothing to prevent it. So, with a reminder there have been multiple eyewitnesses of Midoriya's kid having burns and bruises far beyond that of simple kids roughhousing, do you still want to claim nothing has happened to him? Of course nothing's happened, we're a perfectly well-respected school with a reputation to uphold, we'd never allow a child to be bullied under any circumstances, nor allow for something as bad as discrimination. Well, that's good to hear. After all, allowing it could be potentially up to 10 years in jail. Ribbit. Ganma threw out suddenly, crossing his arms as he adopted a tone as if he was merely talking about the weather. Of course, lying about it could lead to a far worse sentence, depending on the severity of the discrimination, but I'm sure we don't have to worry about that, right, Principal? All right. Still, it can't hurt to check. After all, if you've got nothing to hide, then there's no issue with Mio using that search warrant to be sure, it is her job after all. Mr. Hagakure spoke up, leaning against the desk. I'm sure you're sweating, your heart rate is rising, your eyes are dilating, I'm sure it's all just coincidence that you're exhibiting all the signs of a nervous liar. Mio? On it. 10 painful, suspenseful, worrying minutes passed as they watched the woman conduct her search, looking around the room for her evidence. It was near the end where things took a turn, when she found a set of tapes that had security footage on them. Conveniently, since the massive boom in the amount of support jobs there were. In Japan happened, the police had become more and more equipped with special useful tools to help analyze things such as these tapes without needing to look for a way to use them. Mio put in the tapes and the rest of the parents slowly watched as intense focus eventually turned to horror and shock, followed by snarling anger as the principal began sweating more and more. Eventually, she didn't even bother with the rest of the tapes, instead rounding on the principal and storming up to him. You, Mio? You bstrd. You sick FING a-hole. These are the kind of people you employ. I thought the idea of them just neglecting him was bad, but they were FING involved. Several eyes went wide in horror at that. Inko felt she might be sick. Look I dash. Shut up. You fired a woman for speaking up against one of the worst offenders. How sick in the goddamn head do you have to be to do that? We were going to give you a chance to make a change, but no, you don't deserve that. Mio angrily stormed up to Inko next, calming down slightly and taking her wrist. Come on, we're going to go get Izuku. He needs to understand what about all this was wrong. Yairuzu, you tell the newly jobless a-hole what's going to happen. With pleasure. The wealthy man nodded, before clapping his hands together and glaring at the brunette. As Mio has told you, you're going to be finding yourself dealing with a lot of arrest warrants soon. No doubt, with Inko being the first to bring this issue up, her acting lawyer, in this case Ganma here, will then be coming after you all relentlessly, which if you've heard of his cases, I'm sure already scares you enough. But then there's me. Mr. Hagakure spoke up. I have a favor I can call in, and if I do, your school will then be being defended by me, and I can assure you, I have no plans to give you a winning defense. You will all get the punishment you deserve for the undue distress you've caused young Midoriya. And to top it all off, as soon as this begins, I will buy out this school. I've already got offers sitting on the fence. Yairuzu smirked slightly as the principal before him paled. Every single inadequate member of staff will be dealt with one way or another, and actually good teachers who won't hurt their students will be brought in. None of us plan to go easy on you. However, if you cooperate, we will at least avoid calling in Hagakure's favor. Ribbit. Ganma finally spoke again. If you rein in your students, ensure everyone stops attacking Izuku, ensure Katsuki Bakugo especially is properly disciplined and not allowed to keep on doing what he has been to Izuku, along with the rest of these bullies, we will at least let you have an actual defense attorney so you may have a chance. Make no mistake though, if you even think of ignoring this all, or even trying to make his situation worse while you still can, Mr. Hagakure spoke up slowly as he stood up. Mr. Yairuzu finished off with a leveled glare. You will find out what it's like when we stop playing around. He said with a dark tone of voice, before the three men turned, leaving a shaking, terrified principal behind to deal with the consequences of his actions. 1 month later. Kyoka hummed a tune to herself as she hurried along the nicer streets of Muzurafu, her parents letting her wander freely as long as she texted them every 15 or so minutes, school having been let out. She decided, as they turned out to live close enough to each other that she'd run to Izuku's school and try to catch him on the way out. It would be nice to hang out, or even just walk him home if he was in a rush. It was just nice getting to see Izuku. It always made her happy when she saw his smile. Especially as it seemed to be getting brighter and brighter over the last month. The first week it had dulled a bit, but then suddenly, he was happier than she could ever remember him being, and the girls loved it, they all did. Seeing Izuku happy was what they wanted, and it was happening. It was with that thought Kyoka couldn't help but smile as she continued on, eventually making it to Aldera. Her smile dropped when she heard the familiar sounds of explosions and she ran into the schoolyard, spotting Bakugo advancing on Izuku. But this was different. Izuku, while he still seemed scared and nervous, was genuinely standing defiantly even with no one to defend, ready to fight for himself. Kyoka was already preparing to jump to his side to help, but before she even needed to, Katsuki Bakugo. Enough. A female voice shouted, and she looked up to see a haggard-looking woman running towards them with a tag announcing her as a new employee ran towards them. We've been through this 100 times already. It doesn't matter that you have a strong quirk, you can't attack people you think have weaker ones or those who don't have any. Why FING not? He's just a useless FING Deku dash. Bakugo. Any more swearing like that and you'll be staying for another hour in detention today. He's just as important and useful as anyone else, and that nickname is incredibly demeaning. Someone who wants to be a hero should know better. Get into the detention room, now. F you. Bakugo shouted, before turning and running off, right past Kyoka, who he scowled at but didn't stop for. She rolled her eyes at him but smiled again, happy to see he was actually being dealt with. He didn't get away with hurting her Izuku. She didn't even register the fact she just called Izuku hers. Izuku's face lit up the second he saw her, running towards her with a massive smile. Kyoka. Hey Izu. She smirked softly, holding her hands out for a hug. He happily came in for it, wrapping his hands around her tight. She was grateful he always respected her original desire not to hug a boy too much, but she wished a little bit now he'd realized they were long past that. Still she just smiled as she held him equally tight. How was school? It was great. I'm learning so much and my new teachers are super nice. Plus Bakugo and his friends can't pick on me anymore, he explained, making her let out a small cheer as she pulled away, grabbing his hand. What are you doing here by the way? I wanted to see my friend. She explains as if it was the most obvious thing ever. So I came here to see if you wanted to play. Or just to walk home together. Oh. The forest nearby has a really nice nature path. We could walk along that and play. Izuku said with a bright smile, pulling her along as she chuckled, her smile widening as she took him in. He still had a few bruises and burns but they were beginning to fade, no longer being constantly added to, he was healing and getting better and it made her so happy to see. They'd done it, they'd managed to help improve his situation. And with the lessening injuries seemed to be even more growing confidence. It made everything about this feel like a triumph as Izuku stopped and Kyoka looked ahead to see the path he was talking about, looking beautiful as it went into the forest. Ready? Izuku asked, getting a smile and nod from Kyoka. They both took their first step together, neither aware in that moment that they were starting a new tradition between best friends, one that would last for years, a tradition for them alone on a path that was their own. And that path, though they didn't know it, would be endlessly important to Izuku's future. But still, before they could get there, they had another 7 years together with their friends and each other to get through. Merry Christmas! The kids cheered in response to the festive cry of their parents in the lounge of Yayorozu Manor as they closed out the first year of all knowing each other. It was a surprising, but not unwelcome happenstance that due to several circumstances, all 7 families had not had plans for the year and could spend Christmas together. It was an exciting time and all 7 of the kids were beaming happily as they ripped open presents, posed for pictures and beamed as they did everything they could to make each other more happy than the other to spread the most festive joy. Right now, Mina was winning by making Achiko laugh by tickling her feet as the others giggled. And Izuku's personal favorite picture had to be the one they took with their ugly, actually rather nice, Christmas sweaters that read "Best Friends" when they lined up side by side. Izuku? A voice asked beside the freckle-faced Bai, making him cut off his giggles as he blinked and turned, seeing a slightly shy Momo standing with a present in hand. Merry Christmas. He gasped in surprise, before beaming as he took the gift and opened it up, only to find inside something that dropped his jaw. A signed set of wild pussycat figures. While he was a massive fan of All Might, it was a lesser-known fact, mostly only to his mom and his friends that he adored the Pussycats, Mandalay and Ragdoll in particular due to how close they were to being quirkless heroes. And sure enough, the 2 autographs most prominent were from the 2 cats. With a small gasp, he looked up to see Momo smiling shyly at him and before he knew what he was doing he had her waist wrapped in his arms as he held her tight. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. He repeated rapidly with a massive smile, shining brighter than the sun in absolute joy as Momo blinked before beaming back and holding him. I love it. I'm glad, I heard they were at a party my mother and father were at, so I asked them to see if they could get this. She explained with a light giggle and he beamed, internally taking a note to thank the Yayorozus as soon as possible. Alright guys. Dinner's ready. It could wait. He had to get to the table before Achiko and Mina if he wanted there to be food left to eat. So, that's how I do the E minor? 7-year-old Izuku Midoriya asked as he put his hand over the piano, as Kyoka nodded while nearby Achiko cutely furrowed up her brow. These strings are really sore to pull on. She huffed with a pout, making Kyoka giggle as she gave the girl a pick. Here, Mom says this helps. She said as she gave it over, before turning to Izuku then nodding with a big smile. MHM. The brunette in the room hummed then smiled as she found the pick relieved her fingers of the strain, before looking up. So what do we play once you teach us, Kyoka? It depends what we learn? The onyx-eyed girl explained before grinning with excitement. Oh. But maybe we can play some Hex Girl songs or something soon. They're super fun. I'd like that. Izuku beamed, giggling away to himself. Does that make me? Afro lady. Luna? Luna. Kyoka confirmed with an excited smile and giggle. And Achiko would be Thorn because she has the guitar. So, you're a Dusk? Yeah. Kyoka nodded before pausing them pouting. But then I should be playing drums, not bass. I'll call you Thorn. Achiko offered immediately, with Izuku nodding along rapidly. Yeah. I'll call White Ouch. He yelped suddenly, clutching the back of his head making both girls jump before frowning, walking over to him. Headache again? Kyoka asked, her face showing a worried expression, and he nodded with a light pout. Achiko rushed over quickly, pulling him into a hug and putting his head into her neck. "It's okay," she said soothingly, as he heard Kyoka stepping away, rummaging through something nearby. "I'll keep your eyes protected from the light until you feel better." Thank you, Achiko? Here." Kyoka spoke up suddenly, making Izuku pull his eyes out for a moment to see Kyoka coming over with headphones of some description, making him blink curiously. "Dad got this for me when my quirk started hurting. It's a soft noise thingy. It plays soothing noises that won't hurt to make you feel better." She put the headphones on him as she said this, turning on the machine, a soft drone filling his ears, making let out a small mutter of content. He smiled at Jairu, making her blush and look down with a shy glance but a pleased smile at helping him, taking his wrist and giving it a gentle, comforting squeeze as Achiko hugged his side with a gentle giggle he barely heard over the machine. Once the headache soothed, he promised himself he'd give it his all to make both girls happy with his musical skill in return. Izuku beamed wide as he ran ahead through the streets, only pausing at roads and such for his mother to catch up, on Halloween night. Skin-tight blue and yellow spandex clung to his body, a clearly homemade imitation of All Might's costume, hair bouncing on his shoulders lightly as he ran ahead. "Izuku, wait up!" his mother called, exasperated with a slight roll of her eyes as she did her best to keep up. "Getting there early doesn't mean the others will get there early too. I know, but I don't want to miss a chance to see them." Izuku pouted cutely as they crossed the street, coming up on a cafe. "And I want to see their costumes. I bet Kyoka will go as a hex girl." Inko just chuckled and shook her head in fond amusement at Izuku's antics as they reached the cafe, just in time to see a familiar pink-skinned family approaching along with a miniature black skeletal alien creature with a long black head by the looks of it in Myo Ashido's grip. The mom had taken the quick and easy route, just putting on her old UFC uniform. The weird creature then took off from the woman once it spotted Izuku and revealed itself to be Mina in a costume. Izuku beamed as he rushed to her, the two meeting in the middle and almost knocking each other over as they hugged one another. "Whoa! Your costume looks amazing, Mina." Izuku beamed wide, before pausing and tilting his head. "But what are you?" "A xenomorph," she chirped cheerfully with a giggle. "It's an alien in my favorite movie." At that, Inko blinked, then turned to the girl's parents, the dad looking sheepish and the mother looking bemused. Her uncle for some reason thought it would be a good idea to show her. Luckily, for some reason instead of finding it scary she got obsessed with the alien. "'Cause it's cool." Mina pouted instantly, overhearing them, making Izuku giggles. "Well, if Mina thinks so then I do too." He beams wide, making the parents coo before they shake their head and Myo chuckles. "Okay, let's get inside. We don't want to keep the Jairus waiting," the policewoman suggested, ushering them all inside. Once they quickly found the family and Izuku let out a small triumphant whoop upon seeing Kyoka in a dark blood-red dress with a red knotted belt and a red bat necklace. "I was right, she's Thorn." When the Jairus spotted the group, they all perked up and Kyoka waved them over, Mina and Izuku quickly running to her side. "Kyoka. Hey guys." Kyoka smiled as she got out of her seat to see them. "I love your costumes." "Same." Izuku giggled, before turning to Inko. Mom, look, I was right, she's a hex girl." "Yes, I can see that, Izuku." Inko sighed and shook her head, before turning to the others with an exasperated yet amused smile. "This is why I never make bets with him." The others snickered, before Kyotoku grinned. "Oh, by the way, some good news. The Ajui's business meeting was cancelled, so they're free as well. They're in the park right now, so if we head out quick, we can grab them as well." "That's great." Mina's dad gave a thumbs up and a grin, before ruffling Izuku and his daughter's heads. "I'm sure these three will be happy to hear that." "Yay!" Mina cheered excitedly, hopping in place. "Tsu's coming too?" "If we hurry, yeah." Kyotoku nodded, before looking up at Mr. Ashido who rolled his eyes in amusement. All right, I'll give you a discount for the food. Thanks for looking after this lot anyways." Mika giggled before her husband could respond and gave a kind smile. "It's no trouble, it's nice to have our day booked with something fairly normal for once." "Well, I better get going then, my work will only wait so long." Inko smiled, before leaning down to Izuku and pecking his forehead. "Be good sweetie, don't get stuck in a window." Hey, that was Mina." He pouted, making the others snicker as Mina looked insulted before crossing her arms and pouting. "Traitor. I only did that once." The others snickered, as the parents said goodbye, before soon enough the group had set off once more into the night. It only took about 10 minutes before they reached the park and only another few minutes after that to find a group of green-haired individuals walking about. "Tsu!" Mina shouted out immediately, making the group turn, and then the smallest one beamed as she hurried over as the parents smiled fondly at them while Izuku felt his jaw drop as he saw Tsu's costume. The curly hair, the black highlights, the diamond-shaped freckles and the red shoes. Tsu, are you, me? Izuku asked as she reached them, causing the frog girl to blush and nod as she looked away, somewhat shy. Ribbit. I couldn't think of anything scary, so I decided to go as something that makes me happy. She explained, and Izuku's face went bright red as he sputtered in shock, before. Click. Both their eyes went wide and whipped around to see Ganma Azui with a smug grin, camera in hand. I'll be sure to make sure everyone has a copy of this. Dad. Ribbit. Izuku squeaked and hid his face, as the others all laughed and grinned at the duo. When they finally calmed down though, Baru hummed. So, Ribbit, shall we get going? She asked, nodding to the exit. People will only be accepting visitors so long. Right. Mika nodded, before smiling at the kids. Alright, you four, remember to always stick together, and if you think you shouldn't be talking to someone, get away from them as fast as possible. They all nodded in understanding, Azui and Mina pairing up, leaving Kyoka to come to Izuku, and he felt something in his hand. That made him blink. He looked down, seeing Kyoka had taken his hand and was holding it. Jairu? So we don't get separated. She blushed and looked away. You don't mind, right? And no. He smiled wide, if shyly, as he squeezed her hand. You can hold my hand whenever you want to. She smiled back at him with relief, before the group set off to go trick-or-treating, and none of the kids noticed Mika giving Kyotoku a smug look. No boy will ever be good enough for her, huh? Well, the blonde father huffed, refusing to yield ground as he shrugged. There's still a chance he's not a boy technically, I'm not saying I'm wrong yet. So you're banking on him being trans to be right? Baru deadpanned at him, with a slight raised brow, and he blushed at being called out. It's a possibility. He's not wrong. Ganma nodded in agreement, backing the man up, and in response both mothers just sighed. Stubborn. They said in exasperated unison. How does your mom always look so pretty? It was an innocent question, filled with nothing but pure curiosity from 8-year-old Izuku to Momo, as the group were relaxing in the girls' room at her manor. What do you mean? Momo asked with a curious tilt of the head at her friend, who blushed lightly as he hummed. Well, your mom always has that cool stuff on her face that makes her look super duper pretty whenever I see her. How does she do that? He asked curiously, and several of the girls stared at him in surprise, only Achiko seeming similarly confused. You don't know what makeup is? Toru asked with genuine disbelief in her voice, and Izuku nodded. Almost as soon as he did, Mina slammed her hands into the floor and pushed to her feet with a dramatic gasp. Unacceptable. No girl cannot know what makeup is. She declared with shock. I'm the one who asked Mina. And like I said, no girl cannot know what makeup is. She said determinedly, before turning to Momo. We need to fix this right away. Momo, for her part, just nodded, going along with Mina's mayhem since for once it would be relatively safe, ringing a button. Mother? Could I ask you a few questions about makeup? And that was how, about 20 minutes later, and with a few quick texts to parents, Izuku and the girls found themselves all sitting in front of Mrs. Yaoyorozu, who was eagerly showing them all her palette of eyeshadows. Izuku in particular, by coincidence, happened to be one of the most curious and interested. Of course he was. The idea that you could transform how you looked with a few powders, cream and paint more or less was a shocking and extremely cool idea to him. What would you like to learn about next, Izuku? I believe it's your turn to ask. She smiled and he blinked, before humming. Lipstick. She beamed wide, grabbing her bag and rooting through it before taking a gold medal cylinder. Oh, what a perfect one for you. I actually have something I think would work wonderfully on you. Pucker your lips like this for me, dear. He blinked, but did the same thing his friend's mother showed him, tilting his head curiously, then watched as she used her lips pressed together to quickly apply a golden orangish lipstick, before skinning her lips in a bit to apply it to the missed areas before finally making a pwoo noise with her lips and giggling. Did you get that? She asked, handing it over to him. Here, you try. Izuku went wide-eyed as he took it, before turning to his friends who all nodded eagerly. With excitement, he pressed it to his lips and applied it, being extra careful to match the woman's instructions, and after a few moments, his lips too were neatly coated in the golden orange shade. Whoa! Achiko gasped in awe, leaning in. You look so good with that. I didn't know boys could look that pretty. Kyoka admitted with shock, tilting her head. Can you look even prettier? Izuku blinked, then turned to Mrs. Yaoyorozu with wide hopeful eyes. The woman chuckled, then hummed. Well, that's entirely up to Izuku. Yes please, I wanna look super duper pretty. And that was how Izuku started wearing makeup. A habit Izuku would forever adore, and never give up, thanks to how much closer it brought him to his best friends in the whole wide world. Momo. Mina. 9-year-old Izuku called out, rushing towards the duo in a hoodie and shorts with a bright smile adorning his face as he reached them near the tunnel a street down from Mina's house. The two turned and smiled, waving him over excitedly as he reached them, before he stopped before them and they paused before Momo smiled. Oh, I like your lipstick, Izuku. Violet is a really pretty shade on you. Thanks, Miss Jairu suggested it, and it reminds me of Kyoka's hair so I really like it. He admitted with a shy giggle, making the other two chuckle before Momo turned to Mina. So, Mina, what did you want to do? She asked with a smile, as it was Mina who requested to hang out. But before she could answer, Momo continued. And we're not helping if it's something we can get in trouble for again. Mina pouted. Boo! My idea to sneak into the police station was fun. Your mother is a police officer. The taller raven-haired girl deadpanned before sighing and giving her shorter friend an incredulous look. Just how on earth do you consider it a good idea? Because learning is important? She offered with a nervous chuckle, making Izuku giggle. You know you can't argue with that, Momo. Momo just let out a small humph and pouted with crossed arms, as Mina brightened up. But we'll be fine. I just want to do a test of courage. She giggled, making both turn to her again, Izuku with wide slightly worried eyes and Momo with pure curiosity. See the tunnel there? Yeah? Izuku asked, now eyeing the seemingly much more ominous black abyss of the tunnel with a gulp. It's not haunted, is it? Of course not. Momo scoffed while Mina giggled. No one knows, but sometimes people hear other people miming and screaming in there. She giggled. Things like I'm coming and don't get close I've also heard walking past at night. Izuku shivered with wide eyes, backing up a bit with worry. That sounds haunted, do we have to do it? Ah, come on Izuku. Mina pouted at him with pleading eyes he'd never stand a chance to resist. It will be fun, I swear. The rumor about a cloning villain living inside is probably just that, a rumor. Izuku pouts at her. That is not comforting. Mina huffed then smiled wide. I'll ask Dad to make our free meal for not getting in trouble at the dinner Kacchan next time. Izuku starred, then turned to Momo. I'm doing it, are you? Momo gave a look of disbelief before sighing and shaking her head. Alright, fine but only to keep you both out of trouble. Yay! Mina beamed before grabbing their hands and dragging them towards the tunnel. Then come on, the longer we take the less people will think we're super brave. I don't believe anyone is watching us? Momo pointed out futilely, causing the pink-skinned girl to blink then shrug and keep pulling, much to their amusement before taking their hands out, letting her hurry ahead. Izuku took Momo's hand, walking in front of the bemused girl into the tunnel. After a few moments, however, it got too dark to see which combined with the chill of the slowly approaching winter wasn't amazing to feel. Mina, don't go too far ahead. Momo called out into the tunnel. Silence answered them, even after a few seconds. Mina. What? The girl's voice asked from directly behind them, making them both yelp and jump before whipping around, Momo huffing. Don't do that. Why yeah, not in a place like this please. Izuku requested with a huff, making Mina let out an apologetic sound and a nervous chuckle. Sorry, but come on, we just need to get to the other side. It's like, half a mile, so it's a bit long but nothing to be a dash. Crash. All three jumped, Izuku backing up and tripping into something fleshy, presumably Mina from the yelp, followed by a sizzling sound on the wall that then led to a rapidly flashing light before a pop. Oh crap. Mina. Don't blame me Momo, none of us expected it. Guys, let's not fight and just get OU dash. Thud 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 thud. Izuku's breath hitched as he heard something running behind them making him yelp and turn, a shadow in the darkness shifting past, barely missing him. Gredit awawei. Ghost. VV villain. Run. All three screamed in shock, before turning and sprinting at full pelt at full speed out of the tunnel like bats of hell with pale faces. Mina us free Katustan. I know just keep running. Back in the tunnel, a man with shaggy hair in old ripped clothes glared after them, groaning as he massaged his head, feeling his hangover making his head pound. Ungrateful brats, just wanted to keep them from electrocuting themselves. And ask if they had change. Izuku watched the bell, tapping his pencil on his desk with a small huff as he saw there were still 15 minutes of free time left in their final PRD, due to the teacher having needed to finish an important note thus giving the students more or less a free PRD, occasionally brushing a hand through his now upper back length hair. Of course, they couldn't however even with it being the final PRD of the day. If you asked Izuku, it was proof that just because the quirk discrimination issues were now kept an eye on more closely that things couldn't still fail. Because no one in their right minds would consider leaving a classroom with Bakugo unsupervised for anything. Still, at least the boy was minding his own business. He still glared at Izuku and looked eager to blow him up, because apparently the last 2 detentions he got hadn't done more than make him careful about not getting caught. But so long as the threat of the teacher walking back in was there, the boy wouldn't risk physical action. A fortunate slide of luck that meant Izuku's PRD would just be tedious, not, "Hey, weirdo." A familiar voice, one of the boys who hung around Bakugo a lot for credit or something, shouted out, making Izuku groan as he looked up to see him giving him the stink eye. Apparently giving him crap to impress Bakugo was still a thing. He'd almost forgotten how quiet it was since the last time it had happened. "When are you going to get a haircut? You look like a girl with that stupid long hair." He snorted and Izuku raised a brow before a chuckle escaped him. Genuine amusement as he shook his head, surprising the boy as Izuku looked him dead in the eye. "Wadash. What was it Mrs. Jiru said to say?" "Oh right. Listen, just because you always look ugly to yourself when you look in the mirror, it doesn't mean I have to care if you can't stand the fact I'm able to actually look pretty and you can't," he said with a sweet smile, giving a kind smile that was almost scarily polite. "But I can offer some help, if you really need it. I'm sure we can plead a medical emergency to get the funds when they see how you look if we go to the hospital." Several jaws dropped, but Izuku just went back to tapping his pencil, letting the fact that he wouldn't take their stupidity anymore sink in. "Oh my god." He heard one person mutter behind him. "That's actually kinda cool. And now wasn't that something to feel smug about? I got it. 10-year-old Achiko, wearing a white with pink polka dots one piece, called as she rushed across the sand, before diving and hitting the volleyball, spiking it across the court with all her might to the other side, where Izuku and Kyoka were. "Leave it to me, Izuku!" Kyoka in frilly yellow two-piece yelled as she jogged backwards a few paces before jumping surprisingly high and delivering a powerful hit to the ball, launching it through the air back over the court, to which Achiko again used both fists pressed together to knock it to them. "I got this one." Izuku, in shorts and a black tank top, called as he rushed forward, before spiking it hard with a hand where it rocketed straight into Toru, in a bright blue full swimming suit that went down her legs along with proper sleeves to make her more easily visible. She yelped as it hit her, falling to the ground making the others gasp. "Oh no!" Izuku cried out with worried wide eyes as he slid down to his knees as he reached her, reaching out gently. "I'm sorry Toru. Are you okay? Are you hurt? You're not crying, So, Toru spoke lowly, but a dangerous, mischievous tone took over as she did, making him tense up. "Tag, you're it." As she said this, she hit him gently with the ball in the chest, making him pause, blinking in shock as Toru sprinted off to the ocean, before he turned his surprised gaze slowly over to an equally surprised Kyoka and Achiko. Both met his gaze, then gasped together in unison and both turned, sprinting off. "Hey!" he shouted, picking up the ball as a smile slowly grew on his face. "Get back here." "No way." Kyoka shouted back with a laugh as she and Achiko joined the ocean too to get further away from him, as the Hagakures nearby laughed in amusement at the quartet, already bracing to hear all about the girl's betrayal from a playfully pouting Izuku later if he didn't catch them. A betrayal that would obviously not actually mean anything based on the fact that Izuku was holding Toru and Kyoka's hands and pecking Achiko and Kyoka on the cheek after they pecked him when they'd leave later. But since his pouting was cute, why would they make him stop early? And finally, best wishes from the staff. Izuku's teacher read out with a bit of a monotone, clearly not that interested in his announcements to the class at the end of the week. The 11-year-old began packing up as the teacher talked, so he'd be able to get out early, since today was a very special day. It was. "We hope those of you of the appropriate ages have something to look forward to this Valentine's Day, but keep it off school grounds." The teacher finished up. Yeah, it was Valentine's Day, so naturally Izuku wanted out of Aldera as soon as possible. It was unfortunately, not to be as a boy, a new transfer who was, to put it bluntly, a bit of an annoying JRK, snorted. "Well, we all know which ones won't be getting them, right?" A few others snickered, while Bakugo just rolled his eyes. Izuku couldn't say he was surprised, not even insulting him was enough to make Bakugo care about a holiday like Valentine's. Probably because he never got anything, Izuku suspected. Izuku was just going to ignore the bait, until his eye spotted something in the window and he paused. "Oh, this is too good. And who would that be, Imai?" "You, obviously." He snorted, giving him a look of derision. "I mean, no girl in their right mind is gonna give you a Valentine unless they're insane. I'd not recommend saying that about my friends." He told the boy bluntly, as the door was knocked on, making Izuku smile. That would be my friends here to pick me up early, as I put the letter ahead to go early ahead of time. The teacher sighed, realizing he would not be able to let the scenario play out to its fullest before he dealt with it, something Izuku hadn't missed and would have to remember to bring up with one of his better teachers, as he headed to the door where it opened. He made sure to step back just enough, that what he knew was coming due to the fact the walls were thin, would be in full view, as his 6 best friends all came in at once. Happy Valentine's Day, Izuku! He felt 6 pairs of lips find a place on his face, making him giggle shyly and smile back at them. And Happy Valentine's Day, girls. He didn't bother to look at the dropped jaws, but he did give them all a small little thumbs up as the girls turned to him with more dangerous smiles. So, we're insane, huh? I just he sputtered, completely shocked at what he'd just seen. Mina hummed and took Izuku's hand, leading him out as the other girl followed, Achiko giving him a glare as she existed last. Lucky we wouldn't use our quirks like you all, she said, and fortunately the teacher didn't hear Izuku snorting as he followed his friend. Wouldn't? More like couldn't without getting in trouble with the teacher there, or does the last guy who said something mean about me and had his chair leg melted not ring a bell? Izuku giggled quietly enough so only the girls heard. Oh shush. Mina giggled at him with a smile. He deserved it. Now, are we gonna talk about JRKS, or are we gonna go have fun? Fun. Izuku chose with a bright chuckle. Fun sounds good. 12-year-old Izuku hummed softly with content as he rested his head on Momo's stomach while the girl ran her hand softly through his hair. They were at a sleepover at her house with all his friends, Achiko nearby snuggled up with Mina and Tsuyu under a blanket chattering away as Toru fiddled with the TV with some DVD she'd brought in but not let him see. And of course, Kyoko was pressing her head into his shoulder with a soft hum. You got that DVD in yet, Toru? Just got it. She cheered, before turning as it turned on to reveal a show that from Izuku's perspective looked like it was from the late 80s or the early 90s. And oddly it didn't look a lot like something Toru would usually pick. The DVD for Izuku is in. Wait, DVD for me? Izuku blinked and tilted his head confused, now immensely curious. But it was your turn. It was, but we were all talking and realized that while we have done a lot with you, we have never exactly tried to engage in any more boyish ideas you might enjoy. Momo explained with a light blush. Yet you always do stuff for us and while we know you like it, we still felt it would only be fair to start making an effort late rather than never. Huh, Izuku muttered in surprise, turning back and looking at it. Dragon Ball Z? Huh? MHM. Toru nodded, letting its demo play, showing it to be a rather high-octane shonen. It's got some similarities to some pro heroes you like so it might be really good for you, that's why I got it. Izuku hummed, before looking at the screen and giving her a light teasing smirk. And it's definitely not for the shirtless muscle men? Toru blushed and sputtered slightly, before getting a pillow and whacking him in the face, making him sputter as Kyoka cackled. So basically, he's right? She snorted, only to be whacked next. Hey. Ha! That's what you get. Toru announced smugly, before being clocked with a pillow from Momo, who then acted innocent as Toru gave a mock whine at the sudden betrayal, before sitting down with a huff. Let's see the men Toru likes. Mina cheered excitedly. Oh come on. Toru huffs as the others laughed, watching the show with mild interest, that quickly grew as the episodes went on. Whoa, the action scenes are pretty cool. Wait, did he actually die? She's pretty, oh she's a villain. Hell? They had a version of hell. I like Gohan, he's cute. Etc., all of them enjoying it, completely unaware they were going to become absolutely obsessed with keeping up with the show in all their cases, not just Izuku as every minute passed and they became more enamored with it. And yes indeed, Toru enjoyed the shirtless scenes. If he was honest, Izuku couldn't blame her, they were impressive to look at. Though personally he didn't think they could hold a candle ever in impressiveness when compared to his girls. Get up, get up. Get a move on. Get up, what's taking so long? Izuku bobbed his head to the sound of the Shinedown song playing from Kyoka's speaker, said girl curled up against his chest with a smile as they quietly hummed along to the music, enjoying their time together quietly. As the song wound down, Izuku chuckled gently and smiled at Kyoka with a small hint of amusement. You were right, that song is great. Kyoka huffed then smirked slightly. Of course I was right, music is my thing after all. Modest. Izuku snorted before giggling as they both got up, the purple-haired girl taking the CD out of the speaker system and putting it back in its case. Still, it's definitely better for my makeup than Mina almost dragging me into the ocean when she wants to show me something. Oh come on. Kyoka snorted, giving him a teasing grin with a light sparkle of amusement in her eyes. We both know you could walk onto one of those beauty shows with bedhead, half asleep and in your dressing gown and still win it. You make me sound like Momo. He snorted and Kyoka gave a 50-50 gesture with her hand. Well, you are about equal. She admitted with a chuckle, before giving him a teasing grin. I think she definitely is faster with the mascara though. Hey, I have shaky hands. He gave her a playful pout, looking away with a small huff. I don't want to poke my eye out with the brush. That's fair? Anyways. Kyoka clapped her hands together once before grabbing her phone from off the desk and sitting beside him. We said we'd text the others once we were settled in, so let's see. Momo's asking where our next sleepover is going to be. Izuku chuckled with amusement, closing his eyes and giving a soft smile. If she doesn't mind, I'd like it if you all came over to mine again this Wednesday. I want to show you all something. Kyoka nodded, texting it to their taller friend. A minute later a few pings came through and the purple-haired girl hummed, checking her messages. Let's see. Looks like everyone is in this time, again. Momo was right, her parents helping us move closer together was good for us. Perfect. Izuku beamed, punching the air with delight at that. Sleepovers are the best when we're all together. Well, they're more amusing anyways. Kyoka snorted with a light grin. Even if Mina and Toru together makes them a death trap sometimes. I can't think of a valid objection to that. Izuku admitted with a sheepish giggle causing a smug smirk to appear on Kyoka's face. Yeah, because I'm right. She snickered, causing Izuku to roll his eyes fondly. Then the girl straightened up a little as a gentler smile came onto her face. So, are we going to have our walk this week again? Izuku blinked then smiled softly, a fond gaze roaming over his friend for a moment before meeting her eyes. Of course. I wouldn't miss that walk for anything, even if someone offered me a quirk to give it up I wouldn't. Kyoka blushed lightly and gave him a gentle shove and chuckle. Oh come on, that might be saying a bit much. No, I meant it. Izuku said seriously with a bright smile for her. You're like my best friend. We're all best friends. Kyoka pointed out with a snort. Yeah, but I mean you're like my best friend of my best friends. He chuckled, grinning at her gently as he began to gush. We always go on this walk together. We see each other almost every day after school even if we don't see any of the others, and whenever we need someone for something, you're the first person to go through my mind. She blushed harder and looked away shyly, even as a small grin spread wider on her face. D-dork. Cute dork. You are. Thank you. Izuku beamed, making Kyoka turn to him with a really look plastered on her face. Silence reigned for a moment, then both burst into laughter, greatly amused by each other, as Izuku checked the clock, happy he'd still have another 2 hours with his friend, turning to her with a soft smile. I love you, Kyoka. The girl calmed down a little, turning to him with a slight blush and a shyer smile at the sudden words, but she didn't hesitate to share them back. Love you too, Izuku. You dork. Mr. Ashido. Izuku called happily, as he walked inside the diner owned by the man himself. The somewhat portly gray-skinned man looked over, before chuckling and smiling. Now, Izuku, we've talked about this, you've more than earned the right to call me Mako. He chuckled as he walked over to the long-haired boy in the otherwise quiet diner. Now, what can I get my favorite customer? Favorite? Izuku raised a brow, before giggling. What about Mina and Mrs. Ashido? Well, if they were here I'd call them my favorites, but between you and me, I prefer the fact you have never melted one of my seats or sent a convict sprawling over the food of a customer. Mako snorted and grinned as he grabbed a plate and a packet of a familiar food. Let me guess, katsudon? Yes please. He chuckled and beamed wide. I love hanging out with the Jairus, but Kyoka's dad's health food is really weird sometimes. You're telling me. Mako laughed as he put the food through to be cooked, then turned back to the boy with a grin. Tried to get me to try it for a week. I think I ended up eating twice my body weight in junk food the next week to compensate. Izuku giggled at that while nodding in agreement, excited that was what it was like when a sharp sensation hit his head, making him yelp and clutch it. Oh ow. Izuku? Mako blinked, before frowning as he reached over and gently brushed Izuku's hand away, checking him over. You're still getting headaches? You've been to the doctors, right? Yeah, me and Mom go almost every month now. He pouts with a small huff. But every time they say they can't find anything causing it, and if they can't find a cause they can't do anything. That is really strange. The older man frowned with mild concern as he took in Izuku's form before sighing. Well, hopefully some good food will help this time, since Momo isn't around to make one of those headache pills she learned to make for you. Thanks, Mr. I am mean, Mr. Mako. The man snorted, shaking his head in amusement, and gave him a fond smile. Close enough, kid. Izuku watched the clock, counting down the seconds to the final bell during physical education, biting his lip gently as he wished for the class to be over already. His leg was bruised, and he was desperate to go heal it up, having not had to put up with injuries for a good while since the school-wide reform. Still, reform did not mean the students themselves willingly changed. Izuku didn't want to worry the girls though, knowing full well they'd come down and raise a fuss themselves now that they were old enough, and if they got in a fight and got hurt over him getting mildly bruised he'd never stop feeling awful about it. Besides, he could stand up for himself now. He had actually worked out with his friends, more than just games over the years, as they all did what they could to train to be heroes. Nowadays, most punches, while maybe a bit painful in the moment, wouldn't do nearly as much damage as they might have once done. He just wanted this lesson to be over so he wouldn't have to keep putting pressure on the sore leg. What are you so angsty about? Bakugo grunted nearby, making Izuku have to struggle to repress a groan as the boy glared at him. Trying to run off to those weird beaches again? Izuku flared and turned to the boy, looking him dead in the eye with a small flare of anger. No one talked about the girls like that, ever. Not even Bakugo. And for that matter, all he wanted was to upset Izuku as always. Well no, he wasn't taking it. Just F off, Bakugo, he said bluntly, making the blonde boy sputter in shock. Izuku wasn't much one for swearing, but between the blonde, Kyoka, Mina and definitely Kyoka's parents he had more than learned how to. He just saved it for when it really was needed. I don't care about whatever it is you have to say to boost your ego, you were supposed to stop when the school changed and the fact you're still obsessed with trying to put me down to feel good means you have a problem. He said, hearing the bell ring and sighing in relief as he walked to the door. Just leave me alone, and I won't spare you another thought. He never saw Bakugo's eye twitching as he walked away in angry disbelief, quiet rage simmering in his eyes. And he never saw the concerning sudden perk up, as the boy had an idea guaranteed to really upset Izuku later that week. Izuku! Toru, the last of the girls to arrive at Izuku's house, cheered excitedly as she threw her hands around his neck making laugh and grabbed her around the waist, spinning her around before setting her down in the hall. Man, it's been ages since we had a sleepover here. And yet, it still looks like it did when he was 4. Kyoka snorted from the couch nearby, making the other girls who were watching a news report about the debut of a rabbit-themed heroine that Izuku had set the channel to just before they arrived giggle. Except for more All Might merch. Hey! Izuku pouted with a blush, looking around before more shyly and quietly stating. There's Pussycat merch too. You're right, totally different. Toru laughed, poking his cheek playfully as he made them puff out. Now come on, now that we're all here, I've been dying to know what you wanted to show us. Oh, alright. He nodded, a more shy expression taking over his face as he walked through the room, to his room. It was silent for a few moments as they heard the sound of shuffling and a wardrobe opening, before Izuku came back. And in hand were a set of 4 different black and green sports bras, making the girls blink as he laid them down. Black or green, which do you think looks better? As he asked, he held them in front of his chest. As they stared, he blushed harder and continued to explain. It's hard to know what's a better neutral color considering my hair to match with other outfits. Mina has drilled it very hard into my head to be more conscious about color choices. It can make or break outfits, and your shirts were cute but really not that pretty. Mina pouted, making Izuku huff lightly at her, however with no actual upset feelings. Anyways, you want to start wearing sports bras? Izuku paused, then reached a nuclear level of blushing as he looked at the ground. Actually I've already been wearing them for a year and a half. A moment later Achiko's orange juice was now all over the coffee table, making Momo crinkle her nose as the girl whipped around. What? You've been wearing bras for a year? Why yeah. Izuku nodded shyly, rubbing the back of his neck with a small embarrassed whine. I didn't want to feel left out when you all started buying bras. Ah. Toru cooed, giggling as she hurried over and hugged him. Izuku, who gave you the right to be this cute? Well technically this one is on you since we do so much together. He said with a small giggle, before hearing a small hum turning to see a confused-looking Momo. I assume you have more than that of course? She asked and Izuku chuckled nervously as he shook his head slowly. No, the weird looks I got make it kinda scary. He admitted, causing the girls to share looks before nodding and Mina whipped around to Izuku. Izu, where's your laptop? We're buying bras. Izuku blinked, then laughed gently as they smiled at him, giving a smile of his own back as he looked around them. Really? Yeah. The pink-skinned girl nodded rapidly with a bright twinkle. We don't want you to feel left out either, and I don't see any reason you can't wear one. Next time we go shopping for them we'll take you with us and you can get them then. You girls are amazing. He giggled softly and in unison they all turned to reply, only to all pause as they saw him holding up an Uno reverse card. Where did you even get that? Kyoka blinked, making Izuku nod his head to the table where a deck was sitting. Me and Mom like to play card games on the weekend. I made sure they'd be close by for when I'd inevitably need this talking to you. So now what do you say? You're right, we're amazing. Oh god dang it. Come on Izuku, keep up. Kyoka laughed as she turned a good few paces ahead of him as Izuku jogged down the forest path in his best attempt to keep up with the punk rock girl. I'm trying, you're weirdly energetic today. He called over with amusement as he hurried to her side, playfully bumping her off course as he got close. You're acting almost like Mina. Hey, I'm not that disgustingly overly happy. She pouted, making him snort in amusement. Right, can't mess with your goth image. Punk. She immediately corrected with a stuck-out tongue, making Izuku giggle at her, amused by how easy to rile up she could be sometimes. And no, I'm not feeling like that. I don't know, I feel like something really good is going to happen today. You'll find a permanent cure for this headache? He asked with a quiet fondness in his voice. She paused then gave him a concerned frown. Seriously, those are still an issue? There's got to be a reason for them. She frowned deeply and put her hand to her chin and thought. Maybe it's related to something you're exposed to? What, like dash? Deku? Kyoka blinked in surprise as Izuku deadpanned and slumped forward unimpressed. Like his attitude? He finished with frustration. Kyoka nodded with a small snort before they both turned as they saw Bakugo and two of his cronies coming from a clearing. They made their way into it. What do you want, Bakugo? Yeah, nothing in the forest helps with constipation. Kyoka snorted, before pausing and shrugging. Oh wait, right, that's your actual face. And you stupid beach. He growled, making Kyoka look at him unimpressed as Izuku tensed, feeling something burning in his chest. And his headache is growing, go figure. You're part of the FING problem. Kyoka sighed deeply, crossing her arms. Okay, I'll bite. What problem? The problem of a worthless useless nerd like Deku thinking he's worth anything other than a beating for other people to train. Bakugo growled angrily, fingers popping. Let's just get on with it. One of the cronies groaned, gesturing a flaming hand towards the duo. She's gonna be easy. She? Izuku muttered quietly as a hot flame of rage shot up in him far hotter than anything the pitiful flame on the bully's hand could hope to reach. Yeah, since you're getting all these stupid ideas you can't back up about actually being more than a stepping stone for my future, and the beatings won't make you shut up. Izuku steadfastly ignored the minor frustrated glare he felt Kyoka turn on him for a moment. We'll just have to cut off the ones feeding you that bullshit. Or she can run and abandon you right now like she should have done and not FING destroyed. Screw that. Kyoka huffed, stepping forward, with a burning glare into Bakugo's mad red eyes, making Izuku tense as he realized there was no avoiding this. I'd sooner bite it than abandon my friend to a weird psychotic loser like you. The FD-. Oh forget it. The other bully with the flaming hand shouted suddenly with his patience dwindling and care forgotten as he stepped forward fast and threw his hand forward. Let's just get her already. Izuku, before he even knew it, had yanked Kyoka back and threw both his hands forward, fear for Kyoka's safety, panic about the situation and pure rage at them dating to try this coursing through him. His eyes gained a new determined light as his hair whipped behind him and he stood his ground before the flames without so much as a flinch as a guttural cry ripped from his throat. Not my Kyoka. The flames, seconds away from him, froze completely in place. Not even flickering, still visible in the air, not dissipating but neither moving a single inch as they remained stationary. Just like the bully who threw it himself, still in the pose he'd thrown it in, complete stationary and unmoving from his awkward position, which was especially odd considering his throw had left him completely off balance and leaning to one side with a foot in the air, his expression locked in the midst of the shout he'd let out throwing the stream of fire. Everyone stared in silent shock at the boy, no one quite sure what to say. Finally, Bakugo of all people tried, blatant confusion on his face. Kaji, FING stop acting stupid. Boy. The boy didn't move at all and Bakugo growled, storming over and trying to shove the boy, only for literally nothing to budge. The F-. He's frozen. Kyoka and Izuku went wide-eyed, as did the bully with the elongating fingers behind Bakugo, whose head whipped straight to Izuku before paling and suddenly turning, sprinting off faster than Izuku had ever seen him run in his life. Bakugo slowly turned to Izuku, staring shell-shocked, Izuku matching the look, not quite sure what to make of what was going on. This, you, the blonde sputtered slightly, eyes widening. What the F? I am so confused. Izuku admitted with wide eyes of his own, staring at the frozen bully. It was, however, a happy, excited whoop from Kyoka that made both boys jump and turn to see her, with a wide grin. And her next words were like a bomb hitting Izuku with realization. Oh my god. Izuku! Your quirk finally came in. F. Dash. Bakugo shouted in rage before, much to Kyoka and Izuku's shock, turning and storming off suddenly. I guess he didn't want to risk getting frozen too when we don't know how it works. Izuku asked quietly with surprise at Bakugo retreating for once. I guess he's only 99% an idiot then. Kyoka snorted before grinning wide as she grabbed Izuku's hand and shook him. We got to tell the others right away and get them together, parents and all. What? But they're probably busy dash, he yelped as she dragged him off. Who cares? This is easily the most important thing happening today, she announced with excitement as she dragged him off. You have a quirk. Izuku just sighed, knowing he wouldn't get a word in amongst her excitement yet, and resigned himself to being dragged along with an exasperated yet excited smile. He had a quirk. And he was pretty confident in it himself. After all, his headache was finally gone.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.